Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became UA's Analyst Prodigy? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. From sir@nightieagency.hero.jp to analyst.green@uaheroics.hero.jp. Subject line: Quirk Analysis Case 20. Dear Green, once again, on behalf of the Night Eye Agency, thank you for your recommendations in approaching this villain's quirk. We were able to effect a successful takedown at 2303 last night and confirmed some of your suspicions regarding the villain's use of line of sight when directing his armored smoke golem. Your theory that Lemillion's quirk would force the smoke golem to dissipate should he depermeate inside it due to the difference in mass proved to be correct, and helped make the takedown a lot easier than a stand-up fight would have been. Lemillion wishes to treat you to some boba tea at some point as thanks. He says he's missed you a lot, but assures me that his aim is improving. I've attached his contact details, just in case you didn't already have them. Kind regards, Sir. Stepping off the train, Izuku mingled with the afternoon crowd as he turned a corner and walked towards UA, closing his eyes briefly as he basked in the early afternoon sun. 3 months ago, he would never have conceived of a world where he would ever find going to UA was something normal. Ever since his 4-year-old self had become aware of just what a hero school was, he had dreamed of going to one. Then came researching which hero school had been All Might's. He distinctly remembered resolving to learn English had the search come up with some American Institute for Heroics. When he found out that All Might had gone to UA, just a short train ride away, the news had caused him to grab his nearest All Might figures and sprint around the house screaming that he was going to go to UA. He had fantasies of becoming a student by passing the exams, training under the pro-hero teachers, following in the footsteps of All Might himself. Just like it had been a dream to compete in the sports festival, then go on to intern under one of the many famous heroes he had been looking up to his entire life. In the 2 months since the sports festival, when he had first visited UA as a spectator being ushered through the gates, many of those fantasies had stopped being dreams that he had secretly feared to be out of reach. Not when they were, one by one, slowly becoming his reality. Tears still sprung to his eyes whenever he dwelled on the memories of that day where it had all started. He had gotten lost, been found by Midnight Sensei, and taken to the announcer's booth. He had been an announcer at the UA Sports Festival. He had sat in the announcer's booth and bantered with present Mike, reveling in the crowd's roar. And afterwards, he got to meet the medalists and talk with them about their quirks. He got to meet Eraserhead, Snipe, Hound Dog, so many of the teachers, so many of the heroes, like Hawks, and Sir Knight, and Gang Orca, and none of them had cared that he was quirkless. 2 months ago, Midoriya Izuku had thought that being a spectator would be the closest he would get to being at UA. He was just a quirkless Deku, then, but now? Look out, kid, coming through. Excuse us. Izuku's head snapped up and then he flattened himself against the wall as 5 UA students barreled past him. 3rd-year Heroics Corps students, running in a tight formation, with a fellow student hoisted onto their shoulders, thoroughly wrapped in capture tape. Izuku blinked and pet his head to one side, watching the students. He decided that UA shenanigans were afoot again, given the captive students' aggrieved rather than frightened look as the procession disappeared around the corner. He decided to mention it to whoever was on duty when he got to the front gate. The front gate of the UA campus. Yeah, the hero nerd in him still hadn't gotten over it. Walking up to the gates, the Greenit went through the rote motions that Snipe had taught him, pulling out his wallet and then swiping his pass, an official UA student's pass, against the reader, waiting for it to clear him and stepping through. A smile broke out on his face as he returned the wave when Midnight greeted him from where she stood just inside the main barrier wall when he entered into the UA grounds proper. Ah, Midnight Sensei. Hey kid. Dressed in her provocatively skin-tight hero costume, the R-18 Pro heroine Midnight shot him a welcoming grin. Any trouble getting here? And not really. Izuku bowed. But there was a group of 4 students who were carrying a 5th on their shoulders, running that way. The 5th was in capture tape. Midnight's posture shifted as she tapped her chin thoughtfully, expression growing more serious while still maintaining an air of teasing aloofness. Oh, what did they look like, Midoriya? Describe them as best you can. The test. Izuku closed his eyes as he recalled the students. The lead left student was male, black hair, long shoulder length, and had no visible mutations. Blue eyes, a medium build but tall. Opposite him was a female, muscular build, green eyes and very short blonde hair, shaved. She had a scar on her chin and called out to me with a Hokkaido accent? Not sure. Rear left wasn't too visible from my angle, but I saw a gray hoodie. Rear right runner had a dark complexion and purple hair. Cat eyes mutation. The person they were carrying had blue hair, looked more annoyed than anything else, and had purple-red eyes. Very well done. Did you see the knife? Tension tingled up Izuku's spine as he scrambled through his memories, closing his eyes and searching. No. I didn't see a knife, he finally admitted. Good, there wasn't one. Midnight confirmed, grinning teasingly. Well done, that was some incredible recall. Izuku let out a sigh of relief. Geez, UA and their logical ruses. Alright, Midoriya-kun, off you go. Don't want to be late for your first meeting. Why yes, thank you Midnight-sensei. Have a nice day. Midnighty at everyone green beans. Here. Midnighty, which reminds me, at Diggy Diggy Hole how's progress? Diggy Diggy Hole, patience, Kiyama. Patience. Rat God at Diggy Diggy Hole same question as Kiyama. Diggy Diggy Hole, 70% or 2 weeks. Despite visiting the admin block 3 times a week for the last 2 months, and getting used to being in the UA campus itself, Izuku couldn't help but feel oddly out of place. Which, in all fairness, was true. He really did stick out like the proverbial sore thumb with his traditional black Gakuren-style Aldra Middle School uniform contrasting against the masses of the more modern-looking blazers of the gray and green UA uniform. It had drawn stares when he first arrived here, and still did, but Izuku's presence was explained to the students that had asked. Apparently the news had spread about the middle schooler who came in after school to work with Nizu, and rather than derision he had been looked at with protective concern. 5 times he had found notes pressed into his hand or slipped into his bag with offers to fight Nizu for his safety and numbers to call if he was being illegally experimented on. Which was a sweet sentiment, but it had not helped with his nerves during the first few weeks here. At least Snipe had later mentioned that the students who had given him notes had gotten extra credit in their subject of choice. No good deed went unrewarded in UA, if the teachers had anything to say about it. Which was a lot different from how things had gone at Aldra Middle School. At least Principal Hayasui had signed off on those internship papers. Izuku had quickly found out that Nizu had actually delighted in doing things the hard way once he had learned of Hayasui's attitude towards Izuku. Speaking of internships, Izuku checked his phone again. This weekend would be an internship with MT Lady, a recently debuted heroine with a gigantification quirk who wanted help focusing on quirk development and analysis. So cool. To curb the over-enthusiasm of both himself and the heroes that wanted him as an intern, Nizu had firmly pointed out that UA would have to take care of his education first. Before Midoriya Izuku could be handed out as an intern, he needed a few foundational heroics lessons from UA. Izuku surprised nobody when he eagerly accepted, disappointed as the heroes may have been. Well, of course he would take up UA's offer. He was going to learn how to be a hero at UA. What was he supposed to do, turn them down? He did nerd out further when he was told that this meant that he was, technically, interning at the UA Teachers Hero Agency. Which made sense. Pro heroes had a requirement to be registered as a member of a hero agency, even a solo agency, by the HPSC. Teachers at UA who didn't want to spend the time running their own while balancing their teaching duties signed up with the UA agency. So it was with UA that the first of his internships had begun, also known as Pro Hero Paperwork Handling 101 and Physical Conditioning. 101 foot. After school, Izuku spent 3 days a week at UA, coming in by train and then escorted back by Aizawa as he headed out for evening patrols, and weekends were spent on campus or at an internship at an agency proper. During the week, He was given a month-long crash course in what the first-year students would have been taught on the administrative side of the hero business. Nizu had him learn how to file incident reports, villain profiles, quirk dossiers, and how to use UA's dummy copy of the national quirk and villain registries. UA had its own version of the national database system, also accessible to other hero schools, allowing students to safely practice and experiment rather than letting them loose on the same files used by the HPSC and the heroes, police, and government. Because, frankly, it was obvious to everyone involved that letting a bunch of teenagers loose on the real database was just waiting for disaster to happen. One Friday evening, he had found himself sitting down with Present Mike and laughing at some of the ridiculous entries students had made over the past decades, including going through a highlight reel of the worst that the teachers had collected. Who had thought it was a good idea to make a serial vandal D-rank villain that could throw polka dots from her clothes onto other objects. With Midnight and Snipe joining them, the group had spent the rest of the evening coming up with villain profiles, creating fake gangs from top to bottom, complete with leaders, suppliers, enforcers, drag pushers and thugs for the first-year heroics courses to study and pick apart as an investigation exercise, filling out the foundations for an intricate web of rivalries and alliances in the fake city of Training Ground Beta. Izuku had taken no small pleasure in making the leader of a major gang in the eastern suburbs a quirkless mastermind, just to see how the students would react. Fun times. Izuku wove through the hallways, greeting the teachers that he passed by, to one of the private office spaces, and knocked on the door. "Come in." A voice called out from within, and Izuku pushed down on the door handle and stepped inside. "So, Izuku, how was your day?" Therapy was not something Izuku had expected to have as a part of his internship with UA. When he had first stepped into Inui's office expecting a gentle interrogation, he was proven wrong in the most pleasant way. Sessions with the pro-hero teacher-therapist-counselor had first started slowly, but after the first month their weekly meetings had become an hour of solace for Izuku, time for him to sit down and unpack on a green bean bag, staring at the ceiling as Inui had gone to sit down out of sight behind his desk, to ask and be asked questions in return, and let Izuku think things through with his giant, 6'5" therapist. Imposter syndrome had been the subject that had gotten Izuku to open up, along with talking about mutation quirks. Sitting down and just being able to talk about anything he wanted for an hour had soon become another highlight of his week. It was good. Everything's settling down again after Ueda-sensei left. Izuku murmured, pulling out his notebook and paging through it absently. His teacher had not lasted long after Aldra's brush with Nizu. He had been dismissed within weeks, and only now had his replacement really settled in. "The new teacher is nice. She has an ice quirk." Inui hummed. This had been the first time that Izuku had spoken about his school unprompted. "Did she demonstrate it in class?" "No, she let us ask questions about her when she first arrived." The greenet answered, finger brushing against his notebook's surface. "She's nice." Inui nodded. "And have the other students been treating you well, under this new teacher?" That got Izuku thinking. Finally, he settled on an answer. They're still scared of me." "Why do you feel that they're scared of you?" Izuku let a wry smile spread across his lips. "Because the last time someone started a fight with me, Hawks stopped it." "Yes, that would do it," laughed Inui. "I don't think that's unreasonable to be scared of confronting someone who has pro-heroes standing at his beck and call." "But I don't, not really." Izuku sighed. "I'm just a quirklewo." The Nerf dart bounced off the beanbag beside his knee, causing the boy to yelp in surprise. Then his cheeks dusted with red in sheepishness. "Sorry," he apologized, and Inui chuckled, pinged the familiar green Nerf gun. The pro-hero therapist had introduced the cognitive behavioral therapy support item during their third session, when Izuku had been self-flagellating about his analysis being creepy and intrusive. Rather than interrupt with a hand gesture or a question, the pro-hero and therapist would instead shoot at Izuku with the Nerf gun, usually targeting whatever he was sitting on whenever he mentioned his quirklessness in a negative light, or his habits, or was being negative about himself in general. Then he would say, "Go on with what you were saying before?" And Izuku would continue. That Izuku's self-talk had quite steadily started to improve frustrated him in a very distinctly teenager way. He still found that Inui would resort to it once or twice each session, like just now, but the fact that he was only being shot at once a session rather than the 4 or 5 times that he was starting with allowed him to actually count how well he was doing. Izuku reached down and tossed the dart back over the desk. Inui thanked him, reloading, and the two continued their conversation. Well, it's unrealistic to expect pros to drop in every time someone tries to pick a fight with me, he complained, though not strongly. A small part of him delighted in the idea of having Guardian Pro heroes ready to swoop in and help him. Given how many Pro heroes' phone numbers he now had saved on his cell phone, that was another dream come true in a sense. It has happened once, which means it's not impossible that it would happen again, Inui chuckled. Not to mention, you're moving more confidently. The physical training is starting to pay off. Any further talk was cut off as an alarm jingled, a gentle little piano tune. Their time was over sooner than he'd realized. Well, looks like that's it for us today. Same time next week? Inui asked, straightening up from behind his desk. Izuku was smiling as he climbed out of the beanbag. Sure. Izuku, hi mom. I got quizzed by Kiyama-sensei as soon as I got there. Izuku, so I forgot to say I arrived. Sorry? Mom, that's fine, honey. Good to know you're having fun. Mom, you had a session with Hound Dog today, right? Izuku, yes I did. We talked about school. Mom, that's good. I'm sure there was a lot to talk about. Izuku, we talked a little bit about quirks, too. Especially mutation types. Mom. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. Green Beans P roster. Monday, Mike, hand-to-hand, supervised group PE with students. Wednesday, Racerhead, weekly physical assessment, hand-to-hand escape and evasion. Friday, snipe, strength training and O-guns. It was weird, going straight from the serene peace of Inui's office to the frantic chaos of the UA training grounds. When he had first brought it up, Snipe-sensei had pointed out that a hero needed to be adaptable, able to switch gears from a gentle walking patrol to rescuing someone from traffic or taking down a villain in moments. So that's why they scheduled his exertion-filled physical conditioning and training right after the nice calming session with Inui. Apparently. I'm pretty sure analysts aren't meant to be fighting villains hand-to-hand, Izuku had weakly protested when, 2 months ago, he had started his first session in the gym. Well, yes, but you do want to be a hero as well as an analyst, don't you? Snipe had drawled in response. He was demonstrating stretches to Izuku, which would let him limber up before the exercises. Izuku had sheepishly conceded as he continued mimicking the cowboy hero's stretches. Besides, a workout will improve your health. Eraserhead had said from where he was taking a nap on top of several crash mats that had been dragged out across the floor to better catch the sunlight. It'll be fun too. Present Mike had grinned. Gets the brain juices flowing, running does. Snipe had laughed. Peer pressure had nothing on having 3 of your heroes telling you to exercise more. The two straightened out, then Snipe had tossed away his cloak with a, in hindsight distracting, flourish, then made an abrupt 90-degree turn and took off at a sprint. So run, partner, run. Y'all ne'er catch me, I'll live. He had hollered in an increasingly exaggerated American accent as the gunslinger hero barreled out the gym and into the broad exercise field beyond. Izuku had been dumbfounded for a full 3 seconds before Mike burst out laughing and shouted at him to run after Snipe. Come, listener, after him. The voice hero had almost fallen over himself from laughter, shoving him out of his leaden shoes and into a run, like the blonde was trying to start a car. Go, kid, run. Mike wheezed, his knees finally giving way as Izuku took off in an awkward sprint. He managed to prop himself up with one elbow, his other fist banging the floor as his body shook from the giggling. Of course, a weedy little 14-year-old kid was not going to catch up to a pro hero going at full tilt. That much was obvious, but Snipe had slowed and matched his pace, staying tantalizingly out of reach. He followed, gently encouraging Izuku through the grueling 15 minutes of running around. And then the next session, he had been told to be the one running away. From Eraserhead. The rules were simple. Once 5 seconds were up, Or when Izuku left the circle, Aizawa would start chasing him. 5.5 seconds into the exercise, he realized that Aizawa-sensei had let him bolt from the announcer's booth, hadn't he? Izuku had about another half second to appreciate the thought before he fell flat on his face, pushed over into a stumble and onto the ground. Tipping someone off balance is a great way to break a chase. You don't have to catch a villain at full speed, after they've tripped into a garbage skip is good enough too. He had lectured. Izuku nodded, and the two had repeated the exercise. And so began the training montage blur that was his physical education at the hands of the pro heroes of UA. Today, Izuku had evasion training at Gym Kappa, also known as the Padded Jungle Gym, where he spent the evening running away from an underground pro hero set on chasing him down. The hero nerd in him would have wept with joy at being able to train with a pro hero that he had looked up to for so long, but traffic in his tear ducts had been backed up by fear. Even though he knew that Aizawa-sensei was a kind teacher and not trying to actually hurt him, this was still a dark figure with glowing red eyes trying to chase him down. "Kid, are you trying to leave oil slicks behind?" "No, sensei." "Then why are you crying? You'll dehydrate yourself crying that much." "Sorry, sensei." The trainee was quietly proud of himself when he managed to reach the obstacle courses ringing the central mat before Aizawa caught up with him this time, and ducked under the tendril of a capture scarf that threatened to grab his arm. He made a mad dash to the tangle of pipes and platforms, slid underneath a chain strung out at chest level, and grabbed a pole to swing himself around to run in a different direction, cornering hard whenever Eraserhead got too close. That had been the strategy he had been developing with this game: break line of sight and change directions as often as possible. You're still too focused on the ground. Start thinking vertically, Midoriya. Aizawa's advice still rang in his head, and he grabbed a horizontal pole and swung himself up onto the first deck, before dropping back down as Aizawa climbed up after him. Acceptable. Izuku tried another trick he had learned last week. He angled to the left and squeezed through a gap between two boxes, too narrow for Aizawa to follow the 14-year-old. Then, when Eraserhead simply jumped over them, Izuku turned around and doubled back. Make the other guy waste their energy. Aizawa-sensei's deadpan drawl sprang from his memories. Izuku tripled back as Aizawa tried to follow, then made a sprint across some platforms as the Erasure hero was forced to climb over the boxes for a third time. He was probably imagining it, but he thought he saw a smile on the man's face. The buzzer, 2 minutes, blared across the gym, and Izuku cheered. He had managed to beat the goal. The boy's legs almost gave out from underneath him as he stumbled back onto the mat and collapsed, breathless. He basked in the cool material of the mat and rolled as soon as it was warmed by his body heat, eyes closed as he SE in air in deep breaths. A cold circle was pressed against his head, and he opened his eyes to see a bottle of chill water had been balanced on his forehead. "Thanks, sensei," he gasped out. "Good job, Midoriya. 5 minutes rest, then we're doing another physical assessment." Izuku groaned. Physical assessment test, Week 9 update. Name, Midoriya I. Class. Results, versus Week 1. 50-meter dash, par 8s, 7.76 s, -0.43 s. Long jump, par 5m, 4.25 meters, plus 0.62 meters. Side steps, 30s, par 40, 37, plus 8. Push-ups, 60s, par 30, 28, plus 9. Obstacle course, Charlie, par 3 minutes and 30 seconds, 4 minutes and 12 seconds, -29.7 s. Hey, that ain't too shabby. Can I teach him how to shoot guns yet? No. Come on. No. 30 minutes and a shower later, Izuku was massaging his arm, bruised on a pipe when he had been running from Aizawa, as he settled down into his third, and last, lesson for the day, a steaming cup of tea in hand as he sipped from it. Sitting in front of a workstation, Izuku's fingers flew across the keyboard as he input his credentials and brought up the first of the files he was working on with Nizu. Windows opened across the 3 screens in front of him, displaying multiple camera angles. A mouse click brought up the camera feed which showed a doorway in an alley as a figure dropped into view. The villain's hoodie obscured their identity until they pulled up their sleeves to their elbows, which revealed their quirk factor, and he saw a flash of a feminine-shaped face before it was obscured by a welder's mask, and the villain began breaking into the jewelry store, feeling out the lock on the door. The exercise involved him speaking out his thoughts as they came, so Izuku started. Subject has hand-based mutation, little holes on the fingertips. Their skin there is darker, too, starting from the fingertips and becoming much paler around a third up their forearm, which we can presume is the skin tone of the rest of them based on how we saw her face. Then the burglar activated their quirk, and Izuku leaned forward in interest. Okay, so we're looking at an emitter quirk, which allows the user to project a short, narrow but intense flame from their fingertips. About 8 centimeters long and 1 or 2 wide. Izuku observed, half narrating and half taking notes out loud as he watched the demonstration of the quirk being applied to the lock of the door. The properties of the flame are currently unknown. I'll need to check with support course resources and possibly experiment to see if we can find a comparable temperature since the materials they're cutting through are known. The thief continued to slice through door after door until the half-molten pieces of the lock clattered to the floor. The thief stepped back, and with a flick of their wrist extinguished the flame. After that, the thief waltzed in and ransacked the place, filling their bag with all manner of jewelry and even some gold bullion. The jeweler had a quirk work license to use his metal shaping quirk here, as it turns out. Cutting speed is fast? It only took her 20 seconds to cut a 30-centimeter line straight through. Izuku looked up the schematics on the door provided in the file, along with photos of the post-breaking evidence gathering. 2 centimeters of steel plate. That's something that could, potentially, have her cutting through steel security doors in a minute or so, if not less. Again, I'll need to check with Power Loader Sensei or a support course student on just how fast that is compared to modern cutting tools, but obviously the portability of it makes this person an effective break-and-enter villain. Perhaps we should get you some workshop time so that you become familiar. Nizu commented from his stool behind and to one side of Izuku. Yes, Nizu-sensei. Izuku agreed, suddenly feeling eager. He quietly sipped from his cup of tea as the principal of UA did the same. Your recommendations? He prompted the amateur analyst, and Izuku turned to face his teacher. Well, first we need a hero able to do long-range capture or immobilization. That cutting torch quirk is going to do a lot of damage if the villain can press it against someone. However, we haven't seen the limits on the quirk, like how long the villain can sustain the blowtorch for, or, hold on. Izuku's eyes narrowed. My logical ruse senses tingling. He moved away from the quirk assessment and analysis, and slowed himself down by drinking from his tea. Nizu patiently sipped his own cup. Izuku closed the camera feed, picking up a pencil and chewing on the end as he checked the logs, the recordings, the owner's testimony, and the police report. These cameras should have sound, right? He questioned Nizu. The mouse bear dog nodded serenely. Correct. He flicked through the files until he found a pair that he had been looking for. The owner's statement was verified by the alarm system's internal logs. Also correct. Nizu nodded. Nizu-sensei, why didn't any of the alarms go off? Nizu's grin widened as he clapped his paws together. Now isn't that an excellent question, Midoriya-kun? Izuku, Mom, I'm headed home now. Aizawa-sensei has his patrol starting near home. Mom? All right, honey, does he want to drop by for dinner when he drops you off? Izuku, I'll ask. Izuku, he says no, his patrol check-in starts too soon. Mom, that's fine, I'll have something for him to take then. Mom, don't tell him. Diggy diggy hole at Rat God, I know you enjoy our exasperation and I know you're deliberately leaving out the purpose, part of the equipment request form for your own entertainment. Diggy diggy hole. The problem is that I think I know why you need these immediately after an investigation quick analysis session with Midoriya, but the potential answers scare me. Diggy diggy hole. Speaking as the head of the support department. Diggy diggy hole. Why do you need 6 different types of cutting torches, 6 copies of 4 different types of security doors in Training Ground Beta, and Midoriya? Diggy diggy hole. Additional question. Why is Midoriya listed as quirk analysis equipment on our support equipment database? Diggy diggy hole. Wait, Why am I listed as excavation equipment? At Diggy Diggy Hole is calling. Accept decline dash. Hirowatch at Hirowatch official, 32M. All Might spotted in Mizudafu. Mighty Agency confirms new patrols in the Shizuoka Prefecture to smash the rise of criminal activity in the area. Hashtag All Might, hashtag Mightwatch, hashtag Hirowatching. How dare you betray me like this, problem child, murmured Aizawa, glaring out the corner of his eyes at Izuku with his eyes sparkling ruby red. Izuku, being both quirkless and recently inoculated to Aizawa's glaring, hardly noticed as he grinned back at Aizawa. Inko was similarly smiling as she pushed a bottle of green tea into Aizawa's hands to go with the wrapped onigiri. It's quite all right, Aizawa-sensei. Inko laughed. I was making some for Izuku's lunch tomorrow anyway. Please, take some to eat while you're on patrol. Aizawa's mouth disappeared behind his scarf once again. Thank you, Midoriya-san. I am here, shouted All Might's muffled voice. Sasaki Mirai, pro-hero Sir Night-Eye, glanced down at his pants pocket and pulled out his phone, flicking it open and finding a notification there. He unlocked his phone and brought up the DMs that he had just received. Analyst Green sent a link. HeroTube Pro Heroes Best All Might Impressions Compilation 3, timestamp 334. Analyst Green, I can't believe Mirko's impression didn't make it to the top 5. Curious, Mirai clicked on the link. In the middle of the Night-Eye Agency break room, the clip of Mirko shouting, I am here, while pitching her voice to a painfully high falsetto rang out. Bubble Girl, lying down on one of the couches, almost dropped her phone onto her face. Centipeter's coffee made an impressive arc as he spat it across the table. Mirai remained frozen on his couch, the clip continuing to play as Usajiyama Rumi dissolved into self-deprecating laughter. First thought, her diction was spot on. She was even using her hands to shape her rabbit ears like All Might's antennae. Second thought, how had he missed this? Sir Night-Eye smiled softly as he saved the clip for later. He had found his new ringtone. Naiye, as usual, your assessment of the situation is impeccable, Green. Mirai chuckled to himself and forwarded the link to Mirio. The weekend couldn't come soon enough. It was lunchtime on Thursday afternoon, and Izuku sat at his desk in the corner of the classroom as he tucked away his phone. He really only had one thing on his mind, the Miniyama hero, lady. Well, not in that way. He had an internship with her. Flushing red at the tips of his ears, Izuku finished off a roughly sketched outline of the heroine from memory, then started scribbling in quirk analysis notes as he thought about the upcoming weekend, adding notes as he thought. On the surface, MT Lady's quirk is a binary state self-targeted full-body transformation quirk, shifting the recently debuted heroine from her normal height of 163 centimeters, 5 feet 4 inches, to a little over 2,000 centimeters, 65 feet 7 inches, or around 12 times her size. But could that be influenced at all? Was she able to stop growing in between it, for example, only 10 meters in height? What about 5? There's a number of applications that become possible if she shifts to an intermediary height. Would she be able to decrease her size? Off-brand, but potentially useful. How would Eraserhead's quirk interact with a gigantified MT Lady? Would she shrink down to normal size, or remain locked in that form? Could he erase her quirk at half height and leave her there? Does he work at UA on Saturdays? No idea where to find him, if not on patrol, bait with jelly pouches? He likes the mango-flavored ones. Izuku blinked, realizing that he was getting distracted. The boy instead turned his thoughts towards the different testing grounds. It had already been agreed that she would be arriving to do some quirk assessment tests at UA on Saturday, but what if they pushed the schedule up a little to school hours? Nizu had already mentioned that this internship was likely going to involve MT Lady not so subtly using Izuku as a way to get quirk analysis on the cheap. Izuku had replied that he was okay with that. MT Lady was a relative newcomer to the hero scene, and even then she was called into villain suppression and apprehension missions a lot more than similarly new heroes due to her quirk. Compounding this was the fact that her cases were disproportionately the more physically imposing mutation or transformation-type villains meant that the MT Lady agency struggles to this day to stay out of the red with the collateral damage payouts despite the increased payouts for those villains. This was further exacerbated by issues in recent times where she had been struggling to find an insurance company willing to sign with her. In conclusion, the heroine was struggling, and if he could help her out, get another hero's analysis into his resume, and do something for UA at the same time, then why not? Which was something Izuku had applauded about the heroine. He could see how she was in a class of her own when it came to being able to handle big problems. While All Might would likely break a bridge by trying to hold it up with his hand, while the pressure exerted by a man-sized hand was likely too much for the structure to handle, the relative massive surface area of MT Lady's hands would cause less structural damage, or even prevent the bridge from crumbling altogether. But Nizu had started asking Izuku for ways to make the most of her time, and even if she was taking advantage of his talents, how could he make sure things were equitable for himself? For UA? Well, after about 2 minutes of throwing ideas at his doodles of the principal and Aizawa-sensei in the top corners of his pages, Izuku found his answer. They could always Shanghai her into being a giant, faux villain, for Friday classes and maybe also on Saturday and Sunday, under the cover of quirk limit testing and assessment. UA's heroics course gets practical experience in fighting giant enemies, and he gets combat data on MT Lady in a controlled environment with the UA camera drone swarm giving him plenty of combat footage. Now, which students would work best for this exercise? Izuku flipped open his page and absent-mindedly logged into the guest portal for UA, punching in his login and bringing up the Messenger app. Analyst in green at RatGod at Aizawa Shoda at Went Too Far West at Midnighty. Any suggestions on which class would be available for a UA versus MT Lady combat exercise this Friday? RatGod? Oh? Do we have an idea, Midoriya-kun? Analyst in green. Aside from the executor class villain bots, we don't really have any villains that operate at MT Lady's scale. Analyst in green. Literally. Analyst in green. I thought that we could ask her to take on some of our students in mock battle exercises to gather combat data on MT Lady. Analyst in green. And have them develop tactics to take down a villain that's over 20 meters tall. RatGod. Very good. Approved. I'll inform MT Lady about the change of plans and ask if she's available for tomorrow afternoon. RatGod. All Might's presence in Mizudafu has taken a lot of pressure off the limelight heroes in the area. Midnighty. I'll get the bookings done for Training Ground Gamma. The industrial verticality would be a good challenge for both MT Lady and for the kids. Went Too Far West. I'll ask the second years for volunteers. Analyst in green. Thank you all so much. Aizawa Shoda. Are trying to skip class, Midoriya? Analyst in green. No, of course not. Analyst in green. I'd come along later and go over the footage with MT Lady. Analyst in green. Of course, if I got permission to skip class, I wouldn't turn it down. Aizawa Shoda. I'm not signing that. Despite the school, your current education is still important. Aizawa Shoda. What happened to the Midoriya from 2 months ago? Went Too Far West. Yeah, at least that kid had some respect for his teachers. Analyst in green. A lot of running and screaming and crying happened. Yeah, at everyone. Why did I just hear Shoda laughing? Yeah. Oh, I see why now. Who are you talking to, Midoriya-kun? A voice behind him made him startle, and Izuku panicked as he tried to keep the phone in his hands. Oh, nobody. It's nobody, Sajiri-san. Izuku stuttered, just as the phone vibrated from another incoming message. Midnighty at Analyst in green. Bookings are done. His wispy-haired classmate arched an eyebrow questioningly. Yeah, okay, as far as lies went, that was pretty bad. Well, it's to do with my after-school work, Izuku admitted. Aha, Sajiri nodded, sitting down at the desk next to Izuku's. Her voice dropped to a low whisper as she glanced at the phone again. With someone at UA, or should I be concerned? Oh, just the pro heroes teaching at UA is all. The burning sensation on his cheek intensified. No, I mean yes, it is with, UA. I was talking to someone about booking some of the training grounds. For you. The girl pet her head, which made her hair snap in one direction, then drift off. And no, we're doing quirk study and assessment, and so Kiyama-sensei was organizing some for Friday afternoon after school. Izuku reached over to his notebook, Hero Analysis number 13, flipping open to the pages he had dedicated on Provisional Hero Sun Eater, also known as Amajiki Tamaki. He then turned the page to Nijier-chan, or Hadu-senpai. Mirio-senpai was next, and Izuku smiled at his crude sketch of the blonde's face. Togata Mirio had been the first of the second years, actually, the first of UA's students, that Izuku had been told to direct his quirk analysis towards. That session of questioning and answering, of learning more, hands-on analysis techniques rather than simple observation, had helped him get in touch with Sir Night-Eye, the sidekick of All Might himself. Turns out, there had been a lot of common ground to be found between him and his fellow Greenit. "Oh, he's the winner of the second year's sports festival, isn't he?" Sajiri asked, tilting her head to see the sketch upright. Izuku nodded. "Why yeah, that's Togata Mirio. Hero name, Lemillion. His goal is to save 1,000,000 lives." "Wow," Sajiri blinked, her voice genuine. "That's an ambitious goal." After the events of the day following the sports festival, especially when Hawks had intervened in the fight with Tsubasa, Izuku had found himself achingly alone. It seemed that everyone had become too scared to even talk to him outside of what was absolutely necessary. The middle schooler rumor mill had quickly run wild, turning Tsubasa confronting Izuku and Hawk's intervention into a beating of Tsubasa that had only been stopped when Izuku had been pulled away from the winged boy by a pro hero, or that Midoriya had even sicked the red-feathered pro on his winged yearmate after calling him in. Hawks didn't even patrol in Muzutafu normally. Making things worse was that, by the end of the next week, Ueda-sensei had suddenly departed from Aldra Middle School, citing medical purposes. It was announced officially, and not a single person had believed that, and that had served only to spark even more rumors about the quirkless Greenit. That even the king of the senior classes, Kakin himself, had given him a wide berth was disconcerting to the upper echelons of the pecking order. As a result, everyone had followed suit, giving Izuku too much space that it was almost suffocatingly quiet around him. At first, he had enjoyed it, being able to work on his analysis without anyone stealing his book, or slashing across it with a permanent marker. He soon found it to be a lonely existence. Sajiri Fuka had changed that by quietly sitting near him at lunch about a month ago. That the wispy-haired girl had broken away from her clique to do so had surprised Izuku as much as it had the rest of the class, and though she kept her distance, nothing happened. He ate his lunch, and she did as well. Then she did it again a few days later, and had quietly asked him who he was writing about. It had been Snipe, who had volunteered to show off his quirk as a test case for Izuku's analysis work. Izuku's response had been just as quiet, afraid that speaking too loudly would scare her away. Soon, he could speak normally around her. She might be the only person that was willing to socialize with him, but one was more than he had before, and that would be enough. Enough for Deku, anyway. The phantom sensation of a Nerf dart bouncing off his knee made Izuku blink. "Sorry, I spaced out for a second there." "What was that?" Sajiri smiled, holding back laughter. "I was asking if you could tell me about the other students? Like, the second-place girl?" "Ah, yes, Hadu Nijier." Izuku grinned. "I got a chance to talk to her about her quirk, wave motion, and how it uses her stored energy to shoot out these spirals." "Hey, you okay, Nijier?" "I'm okay. Just a sneeze is all." Todoroki Fuyumi paged through the collected future career forms, skimming through them as she counted them up, and nodded in satisfaction as she looked at the last of the 30 expected sheets. "All right, class, that's everyone. Good to see so many people wanting to pick careers that help others. So many here want to be heroes." The class cheered, waving their arms in the air along with a smattering of laughter. While this had been her first teaching job and the students had been rowdier than she had been taught to expect, the white-haired teacher had found herself connecting with these kids. They were the same age as her younger brother, after all, bringing a calmness to the classroom in the first months of her teaching career. Still, the tension would have been unbearable in the first few weeks, if she hadn't grown up in the Todoroki household. No surprise, given the circumstances of her employment. She glanced at one in particular, Midoriya Izuku. His first choice was, of course, UA's heroics course along with other heroic schools. His second had been Ketsubutsu Academy and, as if he had picked it out of a hat, the Kadia Institute of Heroics in Los Angeles, California. Solid choices for hero schools, and the boy had barely glanced at her as he had flipped open a notebook and began to write in that, quietly muttering to himself again until he had caught himself and stopped. It was almost like they had him mixed up with Bakugo Katsuki, brash, loud and proud. Fuyumi paused when she had first met him. She saw far too much of her father in that boy and resolved to steer him away from that fate. Come on, Todoroki-sensei, these extras can try to be heroes, but we all know that I'm going to be the best. You all might as well just give up so you don't waste your time, roared a new voice, and the classroom's attention was turned towards the explosive blonde. Case in point. Well, train hard, Gukun, there's a lot of competition out there, she smiled, but it was hard not to find the taste of her father's words bitter in her mouth. A somewhat bitter part of her wanted to see Shudo make a Bakuberg just to make him eat crow, but Fuyumi instead smiled and gestured to the window and the wider world beyond. You'll be up against more than just your classmates in this room, Bakugakuen. There's a whole country's worth of talented heroes in training out there. That gave the blonde pause, and the flash of insight she saw crossing his face gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't turn into the next generation's endeavor. Well, I'll kick their butts too. He rallied, raising his hands and letting his quirk crackle across his fingers. No quirks in class, but it's good to hear you're motivated, Bakugo. The rest of you applying to UA better have that same kind of spirit. More cheers, and Fuyumi found the bell that declared homeroom and school over was impeccably timed as always. Mirai sat in his office and considered the future. This was not something that was unusual for the hero with the quirk of foresight. The doubt was new, though, now that he had finally convinced Toshinori to come to Mizudafu to consider his candidate for the next bearer for One for All. Had he made the right choice? At first, Mirai had been wanting to put forward Mirio. The boy had the makings of a wonderful hero and he was only starting his second year at UA. He was kind, he was smart, and he was strong, all excellent qualities in a pro hero. When Mirai had first seen the blonde, it had been in a vision from Bubble Girl, and he glimpsed his two sidekicks, well, sidekick and intern, but that was semantics, poring over what looked to be a case file together, with Toshinori sitting opposite them. Mirai's mentor, his idol, had been smiling as he picked up a sheet of paper and handed it to Mirio. That's how he knew at first that he had found the perfect candidate. If Toshinori was doing hero work with Mirio in that form, then that surely meant that he was the one. Then he had glimpsed Mirio's future and was reminded of another face he had seen in his visions. When he had shaken hands with Eraserhead on a team-up 5 years ago, he had glimpsed a boy in red shoes, jogging with Eraserhead in a UA gym, both locked with comically blank faces. When he had first met Mirio, he had been granted a vision of a green-haired boy walking with Mirio on patrol, each boy dressed in hero costumes, wearing matching grins. When he had grabbed Bubble Girl's ankle in a spar, he had seen the green-haired boy dozing on a couch with Toshinori, one head leaning on the other as Bubble Girl and Mirio snuck up on them with marker pens. At first, he had thought the boy had perhaps been another intern he would take under his wing. He hadn't been planning on raising a lone pillar of peace after all. That the boy seemed to get along with both Mirio and Toshinori had been what compelled him to send an email to Nizu as soon as he caught sight of the boy at the UA Sports Festival. His analysis skill shone, as did his decreasingly nervous banter with present Mike. Then he met the boy, Midoriya Izuku, and talked to him, and saw that same heart in him that he had found in Mirio. It was that quiet passion in his eyes that was wrapped in a soft kindness, that same charisma as he talked Bubble Girl through new ideas with her quirk. Her weak quirk had been something of a sore spot for her, and had been why she had sought out the Night Eye Agency. That same strength of character, when the boy had told his new mentor that he was quirkless, and through that fear clouding he could see a challenge. Mirai had no doubt that the boy would become a fine hero, quirk or not. But what if he wasn't quirkless? He was uniquely positioned to give someone a quirk, after all. The boy could change so much as he was now, but with One for All. What if there were more than one symbol of peace? There was power in one symbol, yes, but if there were 2 or 3 or 4? The era of peace wasn't something even All Might had been able to do alone. He had created the conditions that let him claim the title, Symbol of Peace, but it was the heroes that followed in his wake that had maintained it. All Might was, at the end of the day, just one man after all. He could only be in one place at a time. Mirio already had the makings of a top hero, but Midoriya was raw potential. He could be trained, his analysis honed until it was an adequate substitute for foresight. But what if he had more than just analysis? Certainly, Mirio could create an era of peace, could save 1,000,000 lives like he had aspired to. Mirai had initially placed Midoriya in his own role, a sidekick to Mirio and later a partner, a supporting role for the next bearer of One for All. But what if Midoriya were to become the successor instead? Mirai sat in his office and considered the future. A future lit by two shining symbols of peace. The conference room for the staff meeting was empty, but then again Power Loader had come here early. He wasn't sure if he regretted it or not. Majima scratched the side of the helmet he wore and sighed as he looked at the screen. So let me get this straight. You listed multiple people as support equipment even though we could have done this entirely legally with quirk use licenses and the consultant funding, just so that you could pad the budget to maintain the funding for my department next year? Nizu let out a sigh as he continued to sip at his tea. Well, yes and no. The school board has been pushing me to cut funding on other courses to focus on the hero course. Majima groaned. Oh gods, not this again. Exactly. Nizu's whiskers flickered in a flutter of frustrated motion. Unfortunately, I'd be happy to do without the board. I do need their funding for at least a little while longer. Necessary evil. Majima didn't quite spit, but it was a close call. Correct. And while a number of our August board members are on my side, there's enough that don't grasp how much money we save thanks to being able to fund your salvage practicals in the support course and how much in royalties Ectoplasm has been able to rake in with his little merchandise startups in the business course. Yeah, let's see how they like signing the checks for new bots each time one gets blown up. Majima nodded. So what's the plan? I'm actually going to be proposing an increased budget next year. Of course, with their agenda and how these meetings invariably go, I expect a compromise to meet in the middle, which will put us within 3 to 5% of last year's budget. Hence, why I'm putting down as many expenditures as possible under the support course. Power Loader paused before saying, Is that entirely legal? Nizu grinned. As you and Midoriya have been providing your support services in a way which falls outside of the contracts you both signed when you joined UA, and weren't hired as an external contractor for those services, your time spent as equipment instead falls under miscellaneous services, which puts us under support course equipment by default. Majima finished, grinning underneath his helmet. Demon, that was a hell of a loophole. Boss, speaking platonically here, you're a genius and I love you. Nizu let out a snort. Flattery will get you nowhere, Majima-kun. And you know that bribery won't get you anywhere either, which is why I still need to fill out the form properly, Majima smirked, holding up the form that had started this whole mess. You mean like this? Nizu grinned, reaching over to one end of his table and closing a manila folder, revealing a completed equipment request form. Majima quickly scanned over it, and realized just why this whole rigmarole happened. Manipulative rat species, I hate you. He sighed. You could have just told me. Majima-kun, tell me the truth, where's the fun in that? Nizu cackled. Izuku moved quickly when the last bell rang, sliding his bag over his shoulder and leaving as quickly and quietly as possible. He waved briefly at Sajiri-san as he dipped out of the classroom and down the hallway. Spotting more of his year-mates ahead, Izuku slipped into an empty staircase and ducked his head down to merge into the growing crowd. The boy felt a flash of guilt as he felt like he was abusing his stealth training from UA, paired with the physical conditioning that he had been subjected to at the UA gyms. With his opponents being distracted middle schoolers, it was easy to slip by with the half-baked skills imparted to him by both an underground hero that was best described as an ambush predator, and a cowboy who could walk silently while wearing spurs. There had to be some kind of trick to it. The Greenit had enough thoughts and theories to fill a whole notebook after several demonstrations in the UA gym. At least Midnight Sensei was joking when she promised to teach him how to walk quietly in heels. At 6 years old, he had once tried on his mother's heels and had promptly tripped and fell over, and as embarrassing as it was in front of his mother, he would never have heard the end of it if he had done the same in front of his teachers. He almost made it to the shoe lockers when he spotted a familiar pair of bat wings as Tsubasa glided down into the hallway. Izuku tiptoed to one side and pretended that he was checking his phone before joining the rush of second years walking through the shoe lockers and trading in his school indoor shoes, always too narrow or too big, for his regular shoes. Successful, he slipped out of school and cut through the afternoon crowd, keeping to side streets as he followed the riverside path towards the shopping district. Maybe he'd treat himself to some hero merch? Which reminded him. Izuku ducked underneath a bridge and began to type on his phone. Aizawa Shota settled into his usual spot at the teacher's lounge, where the rest of the UA staff had assembled, a mango jelly packet in hand as he shuffled through the notes in front of him. The usual administrator was done away with quickly. There was a pair of wrecked executor class bots in Ground Beta's Zone 3, and thus it would be out of action until the support course's salvage teams could pick it apart, like ants taking apart a larger insect. Majima and Ishiyama both took notes. There was a plan to invite MT Lady over tomorrow for combat exercises and quirk assessment with Midoriya. Nemuri took notes this time, since her Class 2A would be the first up to throw down against the gigantic heroine, thanks to Midoriya's ideas. Speaking of Midoriya, how's his training going? Shota pulled the jelly packet from his mouth and tapped away at the tablet in front of him, shifting the view on. Everyone screened to Midoriya's latest physical assessment. In terms of physical conditioning, he's made surprisingly good progress. I wouldn't be surprised if we found out he's been doing extra training at home. We've been working on his baseline fitness and he's above par for first-year Hero Course students in terms of his running, and he's met par for his strength and agility. Lunch Rush bristled at that information, tapping his chin thoughtfully as muffled muttering came from beneath his toque blanche. After the better part of a decade working with him, the majority of the staff nodded along. Yes, that's right, a meal plan would be a good thing to set up with Midoriya, Nemuri mused, and several others nodded along as she spoke. Maybe consult when she sees him off this weekend? Sounds like a plan. How has his combat training built up? Snipe raised his hand, and the other teachers deferred to him. He's got a solid foundation. We've started throwing him at various styles to see what he'd take to. In spars against the second years and third years, he's learned how to read movements and combines that with great situational awareness. What we don't train him for, he improvises, and he's got good instinct for that kind of thing. The kid's full of ideas and can back it up with an endless well of determination. Both Yamada and Shota nodded their own agreement at Snipe's assessment. So all in all, you would say that he has a solid foundation with his training so far? Snipe nodded, and Nizu's gaze locked to Yamada and Shota in turn so that they could agree in turn. Very well, then, in that case we can advance him to the next stage of the training program. We'll have Hizashi continue with his physical conditioning, while Aizawa can start him on the usual set of melee weapons. The white-furred rodent waited for confirmation from the two heroes before he locked eyes with the cowboy. Finally, Snipe, would you be able to give him a full firearms safety brief? The reply was an immediate, hell yeah. Please get off the table. Unknown number. Hello, is this empty lady? Unknown number. This is the UA analyst Green. Miss Shimakaze should have shared my number with you? Lady. Hey there, kiddo. She sure did. Lady. Nice to meet you. I'm the Miniyama heroine, lady. Lady. But I'm sure you already knew that, love. Unknown number. Yes I did. I was there at your debut in Mizudafu, taking down that giant villain on the train tracks. Lady. Oh, already a fan, are we? Winky face. Unknown number. Yes I am. I've been a huge hero fan all my life, so it's great that I'm going to be interning with you this weekend. Please look after me. Unknown number. I've discussed things with the UA teachers and we wanted to invite you to come to the campus on Friday afternoon, around 1 p.m., so that we can do some quirk assessment and combat data recording. Unknown number. We'd like you to do some mock battles with the Hero Course students to help gather this data. Unknown number. Please tell us if this is all convenient to you. Lady. I don't have patrol Friday afternoon, so that works out great. Lady. All Might's been putting us out of business XD. Lady. See you soon, kiddo. I hope you already have a good picture of me to use on my contact. Unknown number. Thank you. I've got to go now, but Lady. Chow. Winky face. Oh my gods, he's adorable. Takayama, you giggled as she saved the contact info for the analyst. Leaning back into her chair, spinning in place, she stretched out as she stood up and adjusted her mask's horns as she prepared to step out. One last patrol for today, then it was time to get an intern from UA. Katsuki walked ahead of Wings, Fingers and Eyeballs, a pensive look on his face as they chattered about this and that. Unimportant stuff to him. His thoughts wandered to Todoroki-sensei's words. You'll be up against more than just your classmates in this room, Bakugakuin. There's a whole country's worth of talented heroes in training out there. It wasn't hard to figure out that she was right. UA drew in applicants from more than just one middle school, after all. Not only from all over Japan, but there were even applicants from overseas as well, exchange program kids and the like. He knew that much. It just meant that he would have to prove himself as hero material to more people, just like he'd proven himself at this middle school and elementary before that. The best. He was the very best. If anyone said otherwise, he'd prove it to them in the exams. Not to mention Izuku was on that UA training program or something. Analysis stuff. He hadn't asked what the demon nerd was doing at the school. For all he knew, the green-haired boy was busy laughing at. What? Laughing. Katsuki had to admit, Izuku would probably be too distracted with UA to think of him. And that thought had turned him back towards his talk with his parents, those 2 months ago. The hag and the old man had both shouted themselves hoarse trying to tell him that Deku wasn't laughing at him, thinking that somehow the weak, useless nerd thought that Katsuki was the one who needed help from him, and not the other way around. Old anger flared along his knuckles, the nitroglycerin-like sweat crackling as they touched off. What has Deku actually done to make you feel that way? The old man had asked. The hag scoffed at Katsuki's sputtering reply. How much of that sheet was in your head and not in Izuku's mouth, brat? Katsuki growled. Whether it was true or not didn't matter anymore, as long as everyone knew he was the best. His fists tightened, the last of his sweat popping off in a rippling explosion that made the extras JRK in surprise as Katsuki stalked off. Soil mud, sludge curled around Izuku, and he thrashed as the wet, runny sludge surrounded him, pulling him away from the sunlight and into the darker corners of the bridge tunnel. A villain. A real, life villain. Not good. He had been caught. Unprepared. Ain't no countdowns in real life, kid. Mick's voice had been light. He hadn't been ready. Stupid. Hey, I thought you were a scrawny little brat, but turns out you're not a bad little meat suit, hummed the villain as Izuku tried to swim out, throwing a handful of muddy sludge that simply started to crawl back to its main body. The water down there's got me feeling a little bloated, kiddo, but don't worry, I'll figure out how to fit in there. Izuku tried to scream. Shout. Anything. He gurgled instead. Was this how I'm going to die? The greenet's arm came around, trying to scoop the sludge being forced down his throat. But I had gotten so close. So close. You're not going to win this. Just relax, it'll be easier for the both of us. Izuku struggled harder, twisting around until he was face to Eyeballs. Eyeballs. He thrashed around, reaching over towards the eyes, fingers extended like claws. The greenet was roughly shoved against a wall before he even got close, his head banging against the concrete and stars exploding across his vision. That was close. Hell, kid, you're a fighter, I'll give you that, but now you're just making me angry. Now just relax, I haven't got all day to mess around with you here. And neither do I, villain. Almig. Texas smash. It was dark and cold. Izuku coughed, stirring. He was lying on his side, and he used his sleeve to wipe away some of the grainy drool running from his mouth. When had he fallen asleep? Last he remembered, it was Thursday. That meant today was Friday, which meant that he'd have his main workout after school with Snipe. More importantly, he would get to sleep in before his morning run. So why was his alarm slapping him on the cheek? And shouting at him? Hey kid, 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 hey kid. Izuku grumbled, slapped his alarm back, and rolled over on his too-hard bed. Ow! He took one breath, then froze. That hadn't been him. Izuku sat bolt upright with a yell, as a shapeless blur of white, khaki and yellow screeched and crashed onto its rear. Hazily, his eyes started to focus, revealing the powerfully built arms and broad-shouldered, muscular form of All Might? Holy Sherbert, young man, you had me scared for a hot minute right there. All Might, All Might? Oh my gods, I just slapped All Might? Beamed, grinning as he stuck up a thumb. Good to see that you're still here with us, though. Izuku immediately adopted a deep bow, even though it made his head spin. I am so sorry. Don't worry about it. Takes a bit more than that to bring down a hero. I have to say, though, that's a pretty mean swing you got there, young man. Again, I'm really sorry for hitting you like that. Just tell me you're all right, kid. The blonde grin widened a touch as he squatted down to stay eye-to-eye with Izuku. Thank you, All Might, Izuku managed to stutter out, his eyes wide. Villain? His quirk was a mutation type, an amorphous body? All secure, young man. Blew it away with one mighty smash. Take a look. Izuku's eyes boggled at the sight of the soda bottles that All Might brandished. This was the first time a soda bottle looked back too. Holy shit, he'd just been saved by All Might. The greenet felt his face flushed red. This was the kind of villain he had been training to take down. Sure, it had only been for a few months, but Izuku had been totally helpless in this situation. There was a small, frustrated part of him that realized that he hadn't been able to do anything. He'd been useless. Shaking his head, Izuku tried to clear his head, but instead found dizziness bursting from the back of his skull. He retched, throwing up more of the foul mud-like substance, before finding a bottle mostly filled with even more of that sludge being placed just below his mouth by a big, meaty hand. Oh dear, I don't know how much control the villain has over his body when it's separated out, so it's best you try to get as much of that stuff out of you as soon as possible, young. Midoriya. Midoriya is All Might, Sir Orf, Izuku retched, another trickle of the foul gunk leaving his throat. He felt the giant palm of All Might press against his back, patting him like he was a tiny baby in need of burping. Izuku obediently barfed another mouthful of dirty brown sludge as he fell to his knees again. He finally meets All Might, and this is how it goes? Just end me now. Okay, looks like that's the most of it, I hope. All Might's words were gentle, boisterous as they were. I already called an ambulance for you, young Midoriya. They should be here soon. Hopefully we've removed enough of that villain's sludge that it won't be causing you any more trouble, but I will recommend the hospital has your stomach pumped to make sure we got it all out, just in case. Japan's mightiest hero grinned while pocketing another pet bottle full of brown sludge into his khaki-colored cargo pants. Why was the #1 hero in casual? Oh, he must have been off duty. Izuku's brain came to a screeching halt again. The #1 hero was here. In the flesh. He wheezed, wondering what he'd say to Hawks next time the winged hero texted. The blonde had loved to lightheartedly brag that he was the highest-ranking hero that Izuku knew, but that wasn't the case anymore, was it? Izuku nodded as All Might sat him down, and as he did he quickly scrambled for his phone, before looking around for the rest of his stuff. His eyes fell on his notebook, placed gingerly atop his bag, sitting by a nearby lamppost. He glanced at All Might, then back to his notebook. All Might, sir? Oh, I know it's forward, but... Oh, did you want an autograph? I already did that. Figured you might want something after getting blown away by a Texas smash, so after I saw your book open on the ground there, I found my page and signed it. All Might boomed, throwing up a thumb as Izuku opened his notebook to find All Might's signature on it. I hope I wasn't being presumptuous. The blonde leaned in, his smile wide even if he wasn't showing any teeth. And not at all. Izuku grinned, running his hand over the fresh autograph, right beside his notes about All Might's smashes, before tucking the book back into his bag and slinging it over his shoulder. I'm grateful. Thank you. I couldn't help but have a read while I was waiting for you to come to, and I gotta say, that's some pretty on-point quirk analysis work you got in there. Those are some pretty good insights for just watching me through videos. You have some kind of analysis-type quirk or something, young Midoriya? Midoriya felt his shoulders tense at the assumption, something that more than a few heroes had to be corrected on, when he had first started giving out his own analysis. No, nothing like that, All Might. Izuku gulped down the rumbling in his throat as he pushed through the doubt and worry. I'm actually quirkless. Also, as well as being an analyst, I'm training to be a pro hero too. Izuku, I heard there was a villain near the Karusen shopping area. Can you check in with me that you're okay? Come home soon, okay? I'm getting dinner ready soon. Izuku, I'm worried. Are you alright? Is everything okay? Please text or call me as soon as possible. That kid brandished a bright, fragile smile. That kid wanted to be a hero. And he was quirkless. The kid was quirkless. Tashinori blinked in surprise, his mouth hanging open, and all of a sudden he was 16 years old again, standing on a snowy riverbank just like this one, looking out at the too quiet town of Mizutofu with his future, past, master and mentor, Shimura Nana. That's why I want to be the pillar that gives people hope. Lanky, odd-haired Tashinori, standing in a middle school uniform not unlike this boy's. Talking about becoming a hero himself, about bringing peace to a Japan paralyzed by villains. Declaring that he would become a hero, about becoming a symbol of peace. And a determination to do so, quirk or no quirk. All Might's grin never faded as he coughed, long practice helping him quietly smudge away the bloody spittle as he wiped it from his mouth. His time was running short. He strained against the weight of one for all, against his body's screaming, in pain as the wound at his side throbbed in bloody agony. All Might! A timid voice interrupted his trip down memory lane, and Tashinori snapped out of his reverie as he looked at the boy again. All Might? Young Midoriya stammered out. Do you think I could be a hero? Even without a quirk? All Might drew in a deep breath, and gave the boy a small, kind smile. Answer me this first. Why, young Midoriya? Why do you want to become a hero? Even though I'm quirkless, I dash. Not that. No, forget about your quirk status for a minute. All Might gently interrupted. Just answer this question for me. Why do you want to become a hero? Izuku's spine straightened as he looked up at the number one's challenge, bright determination in his eyes. To help people, to save people. He'd been inspired by you and other heroes that save people with fearless smiles. I want to be a hero like you, All Might. All Might nodded, a smile playing across his lips as he felt his heart flutter. So tell me, kid, if you want to help people, why pick hero work? Why not help people by being a police officer, or as an analyst, or as a doctor? In some ways, they help people more than heroes do. Izuku's eyes widened, and he straightened, visibly shaking himself out of his fears. Why, yes, you're right, but I want to become a hero because the best heroes inspire people, even if it's just to be a better person. And when a hero does that, it's not just them that's helping people, but everyone else that they bring to action. Tashinori's smile softened. The kid had just shaken off a villain attack. He was looking up at the symbol of peace. Knowing he was quirkless, knowing that he was looking at the man with the strongest quirk in Japan, and still he was asking him if he could be a hero? That took no small amount of guts. The blonde crouched down a meter away from the boy and answered him. Then my answer to your question is this. A quirk isn't everything about being a hero, young Midoriya. Your answer to my question? About inspiring people? That's what will make you a hero more than any quirk ever will. And just like that, young Midoriya's eyes shone, that hopeful smile blossoming as his grin grew unbearably bright. The man was ready for this, and caught the boy as his legs gave out beneath him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and Izuku began to weep. Tashinori thought he was ready for that too, but holy shit, that was a lot of tears. Ever since I was little, I've always wanted to ask you that, Midoriya bawled, wiping at his tears with his sleeve. I had nightmares where you told me I couldn't. And I had dreams where you would tell me I could. Through his tears, the greenet smiled. You were the only one I ever imagined. You were, for the longest time, the only hero's answer that mattered. Tashinori's heart clenched in all the places. All Might's grin lasted until he noticed wisps of steam from his fingertips. Not good. The number one pro hero in Japan began to panic. Young Midoriya, I'm sure there is more that you want to ask. However, I'm sorry but I must leave. Midoriya stumbled, his eyes turning to the blonde. What? I'm so sorry. All Might turned, angling for a series of rooftops as he felt as much as saw the streamers of steam smoking from his skin. A generic platitude was a wholly insufficient parting, but seriously he was stretching his limits here. Gathering up the bottles full of sludge villain, Toshinori turned away from Izuku and squatted down. My apologies, young Midoriya, on cutting this conversation short, but I must leave. A hero's work is never over. His titanic thighs flexed, and he leaped into the air, away from the kid. He'd have to get the kid's number at some point from the Mizutofo hospital, and continue their conversation at another time. The ambulance coasted to a halt and Nakagawa stepped out the back of the ambulance, looking around the riverbank. Wasn't there meant to be a kid here? She checked her alerts again, where All Might had reported a minor having been involved in a villain attack. Dispatch, I'm at the location you sent me to, but there's nobody here. Soaring over the city, Izuku decided that Eraserhead had been teaching him wrong this whole time. The Erasure Hero's pursuit training had rewired the boy into tackling heroes when they abruptly turned to flee. I'm going to have a talk with Aizawa-sensei after this. That is, if he didn't fall off All Might's leg as the two of them soared over downtown Mizutofo. In the meantime, he found a new hobby, screaming for dear life. The blonde turned, and his eyes nearly bugged out as he saw his passenger. Oh shit kid, what are you doing back there? When did you, how? I'm sorry. It was instinctive. Young Midoriya, how is that an instinct? Izuku's retort died on his lips as he saw a rooftop coming up. Landing. Watch your landing. All Might's eyes really did bug out this time as the two hurtled towards the rooftop. Oh fuck. Izuku felt his body jerk as All Might grabbed him and pulled him into his chest, arms wrapping around him protectively and a hand supporting his neck and head as they landed with a crash. All Might managed to land on his legs, but stumbled, and both he and Izuku tumbled roughly on the roof, the two rolling across the smooth concrete. Izuku rolled free, his arms wrapped around his head to protect his skull as he rolled. He recovered, painfully rising to his feet, as he found himself climbing up into a crouch as All Might staggered up to his feet. Second time today, young Midoriya, are you alright? I am here. Izuku let out a groan as his everything hurt. You can't just drop world-changing lines like that and try to leave without further explanation like some kind of deadbeat dad, All Might. The symbol of peace tripped at Izuku's sudden bout of sarcasm, a fresh round of bloody coughing racking his poor lungs. He probably deserved that. My apologies, young Midoriya, but... More steam. More smoke. Izuku frowned, suspicious. Then the number one pro hero exploded into a billowing cloud of smoke. Izuku began screaming. A stab of worry made him wonder if this was another villain attack, or All Might trying to run away from this awkward conversation, again? The screaming stopped as his lessons with three pro heroes asserted themselves, and the Greenit took a few breaths to steady himself. He lowered himself down into a smaller target. He quietly and quickly took a few steps to the left to throw off whoever might have been aiming for them. When the smoke cleared, All Might was gone. There was just a blonde, skeletal-looking man in his place. Their eyes met, and Izuku watched as the blonde, who was dressed in the same white shirt and baggy khaki pants as All Might had been wearing, with the same distinctive-looking belt buckle, no less, began to look to the side, shielding his eyes from the sun. Sheet, hey kiddo, was that All Might just now? Boy, he sure was fast, he croaked, still leaking blood from the corner of his mouth just like All Might had been before he disappeared. Izuku wasn't sure if he wanted to slap the number one hero again or to slap himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. A lot of things were shattering today, and one of them was the dignity of the symbol of peace. Toshinori let out a sigh as Midoriya pinned him with a flat look. He wasn't sure if the boy was even aware of his facial expression, but boy did he worry for a half second that this was Mirai's kid. Okay, yeah, I'm actually All Might. Sorry, young Midoriya, I was really hitting my time limit. That'd explain why he had been making fewer and fewer public appearances in the last 5 years, Midoriya muttered, nodding with a subdued bob of his head, I'm sorry, this is an important secret, isn't it? I'd really appreciate it if you didn't post this on social media or anything, Toshinori sighed, bowing loosely. I promise, I would have tried to get in touch with you afterwards to continue our conversation, but you latched onto my leg. Of course not. I want to help heroes, not to this. And it's not like anyone would believe me anyway. Izuku laughed quietly, his smile radiant as he walked up to the deflated pro. Are you alright though? Coughing up blood like that? Toshinori felt a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth at the boy's concern. Sure, the kid was a mess, but he was dead if the boy didn't have some serious natural charisma. Yeah, that's got something to do with this whole thing. I guess I'd better show you. He tugged at his shirt, and Izuku's face started to grow greener as he saw what was underneath. A mass of scar tissue and pain. Oh gods, he looked like he was ready to vomit at the sight, hand clapping over his mouth. Is that why? Yeah. This is why I can only be out there for 3 hours a day, a memento from a villain I fought about 5 years ago. The hero nodded. Young Midoriya, despite himself, started thinking about what might have happened, racking his brains. And not toxic chainsaw. I went over that footage like 100 times. He didn't land a hit on you that could have come close to doing this afterwards, perhaps? Bingo! About 3 months after the toxic chainsaw fight, I squared off against the strongest, most evil villain I had ever fought in my whole career, bar none. Not even the Silver Cradle came close. They were his minions, in fact. Izuku shivered at how casually. The hero had dismissed one of the biggest villain organizations in the last 20 years as mere minions to this supervillain, one that had wounded All Might that badly. We both went into that fight knowing that only one of us was going to walk out alive, and this is what I got as a final gift from that villain. Toshinori coughed and leaned against the wall for support, sliding down to sit on the rooftop. So, despite me telling you that you could be a hero, now that you know all this, kid, do you still want to be a hero? Midoriya froze in place, looking like he'd been struck. Even for me, you seem like a fanboy. You know I get injured and sometimes quite badly. I'm not invincible, no hero is, and every time we put on that costume, we heroes are gambling with our lives. Are you ready to stand between the innocence and danger, putting your life on the line out there? The teen felt the breath leave his body as the tired but no less piercing blue eyes of All Might fixed him in place. I need to make you understand just how dangerous it is, kid. I want you to choose with all the information, and without any regrets. The boy took several deep breaths, but as he opened his mouth to answer, there was a scream. Izuku and Toshinori watched the crackling explosions blasting a dust cloud 5-6 stories high, rising from the shopping district a few streets over. Izuku and All Might both stared at the distant explosions, rippling across the street like a bombing run, each explosion throwing all manner of debris into the air. The greenet's eyes widened as the realization, the sudden sinking familiarity, hit him. Those were Kaken's explosions. His classmate had excellent control over his quirk. This couldn't just be an accident, surely? What is going on over there? He turned, to see All Might patting down his pants. There were no soda bottles in his pockets anymore. Izuku's mind connected the dots immediately. Oh no. The blonde puffed up into his more familiar heroic form, squatting down and ready to jump. Izuku stepped back, making an effort not to latch onto the hero this time, before the symbol of peace leaped from the rooftop and down to street level, trailing steam as he went. Once All Might was gone, Izuku turned and picked up his bag before running to the fire escape on the roof. He opened the door, thank you, municipal building code, and stumbled down the stairs. He might set off a fire alarm next, but that didn't matter anymore as he made his way down from the roof. All Might hit the ground running, but stumbled as he crouched down for another leap. He burst again, falling to his hands and knees as he threw up more of his blood. He was out of time. Diamen. Toshinori picked himself up and started making his way towards the explosions. His HeroNet earpiece exploded into chatter as heroes reported in, and the symbol of peace staggered into a nearby alleyway to recover. At least there was some help coming. You was not having a good day. This was meant to be her last patrol of the week before a nice, relaxing internship with the UA analyst, and it had turned into an utter shitshow. Who the hell decided that bombing the shopping district was a good idea, anyway? What the hell? Why did this villain have to show up in the narrowest part of town, too? She couldn't get any closer like this. The Titanic heroine tried to squeeze in between a pair of buildings, and huffed before backing away. Not enough room. She turned as she heard the patter of running footsteps heading towards her, thinking that it was another hero. In hindsight, she wasn't wrong. There was a middle schooler, judging by his uniform, running towards her. "MD lady." Recognition lit up his eyes as he waved her down. "Hey kid, I need you to go back the other way. It's not safe this way. There's a sludge villain and a hostage with an explosive quirk," the lady warned, holding up a hand to stop him. I'm Green," the kid shouted. "We were texting earlier about your quirk assessment session at UA tomorrow." "Wait, you're the UA analyst? Green?" The lady's eyes narrowed for a moment, but really there wasn't any other reason some random kid would know about her conversation from earlier. The heroine decided to trust this boy as she looked Izuku in the eye before lowering her hand. "I can see why they chose that as your codename. Are you here on an internship or something?" No, I'm not interning with anyone, but I'm here to help where I can though." "Where's All Might? I thought I saw him heading in." Despite the competition for popularity, polling position, and that sweet government money, Yu's heart stirred with hope at the mention of All Might. Takayama was part of the generation that grew up seeing him rescue people on the news, after all. She shook her head clear and crouched down to talk to the kid. "I haven't seen All Might, and I haven't heard him on the HeroNet, and lady explained, and I can't get in there other. I can't fit in between the buildings to get to that sludge villain and his hostage." The boy looked at her for a moment, then in a quiet voice she could barely hear at 4-story height, said, "Shrink down?" "You slapped herself." "Yeah, really should have sprung for a quirk analyst sooner. Dumb." She did as he suggested, shrinking down to her normal 5'4" normal size, her face dusted with an embarrassed blush. "Please don't tell anyone about that." The boy's face flushed red and he nodded. "Don't worry, I'm good with secrets." "Thank you." You turned to the alleyway and started running. "Follow me, Green." "Right." Izuku turned to follow her, keeping pace with MT ladies jogging. "Who's on site already?" "Let me check." The blonde pressed her earpiece and started talking into it, which Izuku wished he could listen into. After a short conversation, ME lady turned back to him. "We have Death Arms, /dash and Backdraft on site. Already, Backdraft is on fire suppression, and Death Arms is trying to clear some space along with 4 police officers. Slugger, Kamui Woods and more backup are about a minute away." Izuku fell back into the crisis management exercises that he had helped design with 13 and Cementos. Usually heroes wouldn't respond so quickly, but he wasn't surprised when he considered it further. A big explosion like that was sure to attract a lot of heroes, plus they were able to react quickly because this is a pretty busy shopping district and they were nearby. "Why yeah, that's pretty much right, kid." Izuku blushed. He said that out loud again, hadn't he? "Keep talking, kid, tell me what you know and keep asking questions." You encouraged him. "Just don't fall behind." "Alright, who's fighting the sludge villain?" You had a quick exchange on the line, her face turning pale. "Nobody is. They're just trying to contain it. None of the heroes' quirks are suited to taking on explosions like the— Hey, wait, Green, don't get too far ahead. Mamadoriya at Principal Nizu, did you spring a surprise exercise on Izuku this afternoon, perhaps? Mamadoriya? Or do you know where he is? I've been trying to contact him, but haven't gotten a reply yet. Mamadoriya, I'm sorry, you must be very busy, but please tell me if you or the teachers at UA are contacted by my son." Pro-hero Death Arms shoved back a hero fan who seemed to have traded in his sense of self-preservation for a fancy new camera, and spread his arms wide, T-posing imposingly as he tried to push the crowd back from the explosions going off less than 50 meters away. "Get back, there's a ton of debris flying everywhere thanks to that explosion quirk. Everyone, I said get back. Please, it's too dangerous for anyone to go forward." But All Might? The man cried out. Before Death Arms could push the man back again, He was pulled away by his backpack and a familiar costumed heroine pushed her way through. Hey, move it, make a hole. Heroes coming through. Empty Lady pushed past him, but Death Arms glimpsed a green shape and grabbed the middle schooler trailing behind her, no doubt another fanboy trying to sneak in. Before he could shout at the kid, though, recognition lit in him as he saw the freckled face and mop of curly green hair. Hold on, I've seen you somewhere before. My lady turned around and pushed down on his arm, getting the kid's feet back on the ground. Oh, Death Arms. The kid's with me, he's green, would you believe it? Wait, green? As in he's that UA analyst? Isn't he meant to be, you know, from UA? Not some middle school kid. Death Arms growled before Finally, things clicked into place as he remembered where he had seen the kid, at the UA Sports Festival, on the big screen, squirming in his seat between Eraserhead and Present Mic. You were that lost child, he said, remembering the beginning of the third event. The greenet, looking embarrassed as he was held up by the scruff of his neck, nodded. Death Arms set him down, and without breaking eye contact with the boy, casually pushed back the cameraman as he tried to slip through again. You're here as Empty Lady's intern or something? The greenet shook his head. No, I'm... He saw what was happening and he's got a plan, Empty Lady explained. Kid's smart as hell, Death Arms, give him a chance? Well, let's hear it then. Death Arms nodded, dropping down to one knee so that he was level with the kid. The boy glanced up to Empty Lady, who smiled encouragingly. He turned back, took a deep breath, and started speaking. The villain's body is like mud. He mentioned that he was sluggish because he had absorbed a lot of water before, which suggests that it's a suspension of solids in the water rather than a liquid or slime, and the villain can only stay in one piece, or has very limited control of himself once the sludge is separated from the main body. The greenet rattled off. I think that, if we can free up Backdraft, he can hose down the sludge villain. Enough water, and we overload him from staying in one piece, and we could probably weaken the villain enough to catch the victim out. Death Arms stared at him for a moment, before glancing back at the fresh explosions. How do you know all this, kid? I mean, it's not a bad plan, but that villain attacked me about 20 minutes ago, and if it weren't for All Might, I'd be dead. The boy noticed Death Arms take a half step back as the greenet's words seemed to physically strike him. It was my fault All Might got distracted and the villain escaped. I want to make up for it. The power hero felt his jaw drop because, holy shit, kid. Hey! He jerked as he felt a hand slip around his, and turned to see Milady's fingers lace around his hand. Kid, you're shaking. He looked at the hand that Empty Lady was holding, and how his fingers shivered. More explosions rippled through the alleyway, and Izuku set his feet. He pulled away from Empty Lady. Why yeah, but it's okay to be scared. Izuku managed to pull his lips into a small grin. Teach, there's a hostage. There's a villain. I want to help people, help the heroes. Me being scared doesn't matter right now. Death Arms and a lady looked at each other, then to Izuku, as a PRNNE pause settled between the three of them. Finally, it was Empty Lady that spoke. Death Arms, you got a spare earpiece for the kid? Yeah, I got one. The Power-type Pro hero nodded, and reached into his utility belt to pull out a spare HeroNet earpiece, tossing it over to Izuku. Link up and start talking. I'll keep the crowd back. Stay out of it and be careful, kid. Let the pros do the heavy lifting once you explain your plan. Izuku caught the earpiece and looped it onto his ear, tapping it as he connected to the net. I will. Thank you, Death Arms and Lady. Both heroes managed to shoot him a smile. Get going, kid. Izuku's earpiece beeped as he heard Death Arms' voice speak into his ear. All points, this is Death Arms. The UA analyst kid is on the line and he has a plan. There was a surprised squawk on the line. What? Why the hell should we listen to some BR dash? A hero in motion outranks one doing nothing. Now shut up and at least hear out the kid's plan, barked another hero, cutting him off. Had that been Kamui Woods? Had Kamui Woods called him a hero? Not the time, Izuku, not the time. Death Arms cut into the channel again. Thanks, Woods. Green, start talking. Izuku gulped. Here goes nothing. He pressed his hand to the send button built into the earpiece. The sludge villain's quirk is that his body is a suspension of particles in water, like mud. If we dilute the particles, that should weaken him enough that we can extract Ka the hostage. Izuku reported, trying to not let his nerves affect him, his footsteps unsteady as he focused on keeping his voice calm and steady. We can do that by pouring a lot of water into the sludge. Backdraft's quirk is great for that, but he's busy with the flames. Well, you know, as a dash. Izuku continued speaking over the hero. We need heroes that can replace Backdraft in fire suppression, so that he can pump as much water onto the villain as possible. Kaka, the victim, has a chemical explosive quirk, so the water will also help suppress the explosions and stop him from starting further fires. That's it? Soak the villain in water? That's your peel dash. Keep your whining off the net. Kamui Woods interrupted. Backdraft thoughts? About time we got a plan worth a DMN. A new voice cut into the channel. This is Backdraft, count me in, but we have a problem. The moment I do, these fires here are going to spread further, and I'm holding the flames back about 2 shops away from a pet store. If I stop fighting it, the animals inside will be roasted in about 3 minutes, and nobody else here has water quirks like mine. Yeah, that'd be bad. So, what's the plan to get the plan working? Izuku looked around, trying to find some way forward. His thoughts flashed back to the staircase of the building he had landed on with all might. Municipal building code, Izuku shouted to himself. He keyed into the HeroNet again as he ran into the nearest store and started looking around, squeezing every memory of lessons in practicing HeroNet comm conventions to the front of his mind. This is the kid to all points, who's loose and floating? I live tweet villain fights at Illiva tweet villain fights 0M. Mystery hero intern at Muzutafu villain fight. There's this green-haired middle school kid who's actually giving out orders? Like, I thought it was the most senior hero in charge, not the most junior intern? What the hell is going on here? Toshinori couldn't quite believe what he was hearing over the HeroNet. That boy, but how? Lady Air, I can't pull away now, but I think I can get free once death arms, and I pushed crowd further back. Slugger here, I've just arrived north of the incident. Said, I'm keeping the crowd back, but the cops already here can take my place. Kamui Woods, I'm evacuating civilians, but if you have a plan I can peel off. I'm not good with explosions, though. This is Officer Sansa of the Muzutafu PD. I'll see who I can spare, but I myself am. The blonde pushed his way through the crowd, listening and watching. Izuku found a small accounting firm's office and dashed through the front to the here. The stairwell fixtures had been compliant with the building code, which required a fire extinguisher by the doors. Izuku ripped open the cabinet, ginning despite himself. Finding what he was looking for, Izuku pulled the fire extinguisher from its mount. Amazingly, this was exactly the types he was hoping for. There was an ABC-type dry powder extinguisher bottle, and behind that a ABCK-type fire extinguisher bomb, which was basically a plastic bag full of fire-suppressing chemicals which could be thrown into the flames. Once it did, the bag would explode to smother the flames without causing a dust explosion. Fire extinguishers in the buildings. All points, if you're loose, start grabbing as many as you can and help Backdraft. I found a pair near the stairs, and maybe we can find more since this row of shops looks like a single development. See if there's any fire hoses too. Ask the shopkeepers if they remember seeing any around. Good call, kid. Backdraft replied. I think I saw a bomb type in the store to the right of the pet shop. Hey, you, police officer. Into that store, grab any fire extinguishers. Kid, this is Slugger here. I've got one of the police officers with me and we're going to work on finding fire extinguishers. Backdraft, Slugger, this is Kid here. I've got one on me as well. I'm about 10 seconds away from Backdraft. Izuku reported, wondering about how confusing it would be that his codename was Kid, at least for this particular incident. Snipe's wisdom whispered from his memories. If it sounds stupid but works, it ain't stupid. Backdraft. Izuku shouted as he came up behind the fire suppression hero. Questions about his water hand quirk were pushed aside as Slugger ran up, a pair of officers in tow, with 7 extinguishers of various types between them. That looks like it'll be enough to hold back the flames for a couple of minutes. You'll need more. Backdraft judged, sounding grim. I'll help with the villain, you guys do your best. Thanks, Backdraft, we'll take it from here. Slugger nodded, already grabbing the bomb-type extinguisher from Izuku. I'll take the lead here, kid. Izuku nodded, letting go of the extinguisher, then busied himself with priming the other fire extinguishers as Slugger grabbed the second bomb-type extinguisher they so far collected and hurled them into the flames. Both detonated with a wet whump, and the blazing heat seemed to sputter for a moment as Slugger waded into the remains of the nail salon with a third extinguisher. Izuku handed both of the larger ones to the police officers once he had pulled the pins from the handles, and grabbed the foam type for himself as he followed behind and to one side, squirting the embers that had started to spread to the next store in the row. He glanced back at the sludge villain, and saw that Backdraft had finished repositioning himself and had started hosing down the villain, who was bubbling and thrashing about, more explosions rocking the street. Smaller explosions than before. His plan was working. Izuku turned around, finding himself face-to-face with a civilian that had axolotl gill mutations instead of ears. He shoved the fire extinguisher into his hands and pointed at the flames. If you can help them. If not, pass it on to someone who can. He turned before the man could answer, and ran back towards Backdraft, touching his comm piece as he did. Backdraft, aim for the victim's face, like you're trying to wash the villain off him. He directed. His mouth and nose have been covered for too long, we have to make sure he can breathe. All right, kid, but he's getting angry with me and I'm dodging his fists here, need backup. There was a round of sputtering shouting, all too familiar, and goodness, it had been a long time since he had experienced Kaken's rage. It was almost like seeing an old friend again. Slugger here, a couple civilians are helping, they're offering more fire extinguishers. I think we can get it under control and beat back the flames. Stay out of the building if you can, we just need to contain things. I don't know if there's been any structural damage. Backdraft warned. Copy. What's the ETA on more heroes arriving? Wasn't All Might in the area? No word on All Might, but Baki and Solaria are on their way, ETA 4 minutes. Hey, the villain's making a run for Ida. A swipe caught Backdraft on the chest, throwing him back. He tumbled down the street, and Izuku rushed forward to help him up. Thanks, kid, Backdraft growled, stepping in front of Izuku. Dimin. He's just getting bigger. But slower, Izuku's mind raced through the roster of heroes who he knew were on the scene. The best counter to physical semi-solid attacks was, Lady, this is the kid. Can you peel away? I need you to cover Backdraft so he can weaken the sludge villain. Get in behind Backdraft, get big, use your hands to deflect attacks and keep the villain off Backdraft. Lady can do. The HeroNet voice and MT Lady's actual voice overlapped as she shouted loud enough for Izuku to hear over the roar of the explosions. Get back, everyone. Mountain range barrier. As MT Lady's hands came down, the villain screeched. Everything became a blur as the fight was on. There was a scream, shouting, and more explosions. He remembered pulling Backdraft aside, throwing them both to the ground. They got back up and stumbled between MT Lady's ankles. The street was filled with more blasts while the trio got closer to the villain. Kaken's eyes met his, all bloodshot. Was that what my face looked like when All Might saved me? Izuku was vaguely aware of his bag slipping from his shoulder as he gripped the sling, ping it back. Kaken thrashed around as another blast of water scraped the sludge from his eyes. Their eyes met as the villain saw him, and even Izuku saw the recognition dawning on his face. His body was moving before he could think. Are you ready to stand between the innocence and danger, putting your life on the line out there? That had been the question that Toshinori had asked the young man. While Midoriya had not been able to answer verbally, he seemed more than ready to demonstrate his reply to All Might. Toshinori watched as he slammed his bag into the side of the villain's eye, then dodged with surprising nimbleness away from the blind right hook from the villain. Lady's gigantic forearm saved him from the crushing left that followed, a snarl on her face as she backhanded the blow away. Water blasted the sludge villain, and the villain howled and writhed as hundreds of gallons of water was poured into him by Backdraft. Toshinori decided that now that he had gotten a reply from Midoriya, that it was time to prove that he was worthy of asking the boy that question. His side still ached with pain that would have left him retching on the floor 4 years ago. When he took a step forward, bones creaked and the edges of his vision blurred from the agony. Please. I know what I'm asking for. I know my limits. I know how much is too much. He prayed, to the guttering flame of the torch he bore within him. But I need more time. There's a boy in danger and I need to help. Steam hissed from his mouth, enveloping his body in a smoky haze. Please, let me save one more person. Toshinori sprinted out into the open. Just a minute more of time will do. He begged. Death Arms stepped in front of him, but froze as their eyes met and the white-haired hero was transfixed by the intensity of the skeletal man's gaze. Even half that would be enough to save him. He jumped over Backdraft, who had been thrown prone by the last exchange of blows. Give me enough for one more leap. Toshinori begged one for all, that he could hold it for long enough. Just one more punch. Yellow light flashed in the street as Toshinori jumped onto a stall, crouched down, and hurled himself skywards. Because I am here. Inko had spent the afternoon worrying until the evening. Her boy hadn't come home. Bad enough that Izuku hadn't answered his phone, but when the automated response had stopped being his voicemail and started becoming, "We couldn't reach this phone number at this time." The mother in her couldn't help but worry that not only had she lost contact with her son, but the cell phone network had lost contact with her son's phone in downtown Mizudafu, and that's where the villain attack had happened. The same villain attack which had apparently sent 4 heroes to the hospital, and there were so many injured, 10 in critical condition, including middle school-aged children. Her phone was ringing and in a smooth motion Inko reached out with her quirk, snatching up the phone and pulling it up to her ear. Izuku? Is that you? I was so worried about you. Why you weren't answering your phone and dash. I'm sorry, is this Midoriya-san? A vaguely familiar adult male's voice answered instead, You're Midoriya Izuku's mother? Inko's stomach dropped out the bottom of her heart as every fear, every terrifying fantasy started to become true in her mind. Why is? That's me speaking. Oh no. Please gods no. Good, let me start by saying that your son is safe and whole, uninjured barring a few scrapes. Relief came out as a weak sob as Inko fell to her knees, almost as much as the fresh wave of worry made her stomach twist. Midoriya is currently at Mizudafu General Hospital due to possible side effects of a villain's quirk, and while he wasn't injured aside from a few scrapes and cuts, the staff here have asked him to stay at the hospital as a precaution until all testing is complete. She pulled a box of tissues over and wiped away the tears when something occurred to her. He's okay? He's really okay? Yes, Midoriya-san, your son is in good health. Again, the only reason we aren't driving him home right now is because the doctors recommended we wait until all the test results came in and we can give him a clean bill of health. If you'd like, we can arrange for a taxi to come and pick you up. Wait, who are we? I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier. This is the pro hero All Might, and I'm here to tell you that your son was a real hero today. Midoriya-san. Yeah. Holy Sheet Green Bean is in a villain attack. Yeah. Holy Sheet Green Bean is in a villain attack and he is kicking butt. Midnighty. Wait, what? Dezawa Shoda. What are you talking about, Mike? Yeah. HeroNet frequency 203.83, downtown Mizudafu. Rat God at everyone, the situation is now under control. All Might and local heroes apprehended the villain. Midoriya-kun is reportedly unharmed pending extraction of fragments of ingested villain. Wentigust. Wait, the kid bit off parts of the villain? Rat God. Presently unknown, but he is not in any immediate danger. Rat God. Miss Shimakaze is contacting Mizudafu General Hospital for further updates. Rat God. We will be driving a van down once he has been cleared to receive visitors. Went too far west, I call shotgun. Yeah, automatic chain gun turret. Went too far west at I will literally kneecap you. Yeah, we literally have a chain gun turret on the van. Yeah, how do you think I give my hair that windswept look? Rat God. We're not taking that van to the hospital, and we do not use school vehicles for personal grooming at Rat God. though I suppose you should get points for creativity. Snipe fell to the floor of the hospital waiting room as Dr. Shinjo gave the assembled heroes the news about Midoriya's condition. Normally, this was confidential information, but with Midoriya's permission and bearing in mind that there were a number of pro-heroes politely besieging the nurse's station, she was holding an informal debrief with the pro-heroes present. Eraserhead palmed his face as he processed the news, reminding himself that he shouldn't shoot the messenger. Instead, he was going to shoot the people responsible. Let me get this straight. Midoriya squared up against a B-ranked villain, twice, in one day, not to mention that this is the same villain that All Might had to intervene with when a group of other pro-heroes couldn't stop him, and the reason he has to stay for overnight observation is because he got dehydrated from crying too much? Dr. Shinjo nodded. Well, we've also had to put his wrist into a cast because he fractured it, but that could have been just a brace had Death Arms not given him a high five and made it worse, so I can only tangentially blame the villain or that. I already said I was sorry, came Death Arms' aggrieved groan behind the erasure hero. There was a wheeze from the ground, from laughter trying to be forced through a pinhole, and Eraserhead reminded himself that stomping on one's colleague in front of other pro-heroes in a public hospital wasn't what rational people did. Especially when they were such prominent witnesses. Death Arms, Midnight, Cementos, Present Mike, Slugger, Power Loader, Hound Dog and Backdraft stood among other local heroes. Just don't let any heroes sign his cast. He'll never take it off if they do. The doctors suddenly found their clipboard very interesting. Eraserhead let out a long sigh. He turned and cast a red-eyed glare to the rest of the room. How many of you signed his cast? Hesitantly, several hands went up. If looks could kill, Eraserhead would have surpassed Stain in record time. Dr. Shinjo stepped away, handing their clipboard back to the nurse's station. I'll just go and check in on Midoriya-kun again. Katsuki held an arm around his mother's neck as she sobbed quietly into his chest, her own arms clutching her boy tightly against her. He felt his father's hand on his back rubbing slow, gentle circles. Katsuki, I'm just really glad you're not badly hurt, Masaru said, for the 100th time. Reminding himself that he had been told his throat had suffered injuries, the blonde chose to grunt and nod. It wasn't like he disagreed with his dad. The Bakugo family was, for once, quiet as they processed what had happened that very afternoon. Katsuki closed his eyes, and in his mind's eye he saw Izuku's bag, flying across the street and striking the sludge villain's eye. Useless deadhead. Midoriya Izuku had saved him, dragging him from the sludge and clearing the way for All Might to step in and finish the job. With the help of a half-dozen pro-heroes, sure, but who had been the one to grab his wrist and yank him from the sludge villain? Instinctive anger made him tense up, and it was only his parents being nearby that made him not crackle his hands with tiny explosions. He was meant to be the best, and villains were meant to be afraid of him. So why was he scared of what he saw when he closed his eyes? Why had he thrown his pillow across the room when he had held it over his face to block out the light? Katsuki shuddered, but his mother's caress and father's gentle embrace eventually lulled him into fitful sleep. Inko arrived at the hospital by taxi and found Eraserhead standing at the doorway. Aizawa-sensei, is Izuku. All Might called me and… Izuku's fine, Midoriya-san. Aizawa nodded as he walked up to the taxi, pointing at the door behind him. I'll settle things with the taxi driver. Lobby is through there. Talk to Shimike's and she'll take you to Izuku's room. The greenette nodded, whispering a quick thanks as she brushed past. Aizawa watched her go before murmuring, All Might called? As she walked into the waiting room, she spotted Shimike's, who dipped her head in a hurried greeting and beckoned her to follow. I wonder if this is something I'll have to get used to, with how he wants to become a hero, she considered, her face dampened for a moment. Would it be worse when he became a hero? It was rare, but she had seen her son mourn pro-heroes retiring, some from injuries sustained in the field, while others were dead. A shiver raced up her spine. Other heroes stood up from their chairs and started to follow. She only knew who a handful of them were because they were the hero course teachers at UA that she had met over the last few months. The rest she couldn't even place if she'd seen them before, let alone their names. At this point, however, she couldn't care less who they were, so long as they didn't stop her from seeing her son. The heroes formed up behind her, following in her wake as she strode through the halls of the hospital. It did wonders for making sure that the way was clear. People moved out of the way, parting like water before the bow of a ship, and Inko made her way to her son's bedside once a nurse had hastily looked up the ward and room he was in. A nurse had immediately dropped whatever she had been doing and chaperoned the assembled party to Izuku's room. The doctor currently standing by Izuku's bed glanced up, frowned, then swept their purple-eyed gaze across the doorway. Anyone not immediate family, out. They barked at the gathered Muzutafu Pro heroes, and the vast majority of the heroes who had followed Inko inside immediately turned around with quick apologies. There was one remaining, present Mike, who managed to take an extra step forward before he was grabbed by his armpits by both Snipe and Midnight and dragged out of the room. Inko swept past the doctor with a quick word of thanks and made a beeline for her son, who was already tearing up. "Oh, Izuku. Izuku, you're okay? Thank goodness." Inko began to sob into her son's hospital gown, and that got Izuku crying too, as the two began to shed tears, quiet whispers and tender hugs exchanged and accepted. Beyond everything, having Izuku here and having him be safe was what was important to Inko. Izuku returned her hug with his one good arm, his other arm in a cast. After they had their moment, the doctor stepped into Inko's line of sight, smiling gently. "I'm guessing you're Midoriya, Inko? I'm Dr. Shinjo, and I'm in charge of your son's treatment." The doctor bowed briefly, which Inko returned deeply. "Thank you for looking after him, doctor." "Only doing my job, Midoriya-san. Your son's been checked for about a dozen different things, concussion, internal bleeding, that kind of thing, and I can say that I'm almost ready to give him his discharge papers. Aside from small cuts and bruises which needed cleaning, the worst that came out of the villain attack is that he's dehydrated, which is why we have, well, that." They swept their hand towards a 2-liter bottle of water currently sitting in Izuku's lap, with a long, swirly, straw that spiraled up to his mouth. Izuku had dutifully returned to sipping from it. Inko stared at him for a moment, before she heard the sound of another bottle of water being opened and handed to her. "I'm guessing this runs in the family," the doctor mentioned. Both Midoriyas blushed and nodded, which got Shinjo to crack a smile. Inko, though, finally decided to point out the plaster cast around Izuku's right wrist and half his forearm. "You said that you didn't get any major injuries from the villain, Izuku. Why is his arm in a cast? How did he break it?" Izuku went red, and Dr. Shinjo rubbed their temples. "Well, hello, this is the Night Eye Agency, Bubble Girl speaking. Can I help you?" "Greetings, Bubble Girl. This is All Might. I've been told that Sir Night Eye has been requesting an appointment with me." "Oh, he was wondering where you had, Sir. It's All Might." There was rattling on the line as the phone was handed over. "Yagi-san, thank you for getting back to me." "Mirai-kun, my apologies for getting back to you so late. There was a villain attack." "There's always another villain, yes," sighed his former protege. "These days, I'm not sure if they're simply being dumber or bolder." "Possibly a combination of the two," Yagi chuckled, closing his eyes and letting the last decade fade away peacefully into the back of his mind. Both men basked in the quiet, for a moment, and if he closed his eyes, Toshinori could almost imagine that he was back in his office at Might Tower, and that Mirai would be right there at his little workstation. Really, he could have had his own office, but the man had insisted that this was his place as sidekick to be, by his side. The silence was broken by a small cough. "Listen, All Might. I've been considering your successor, and I believe I've found one that deserves a chance. That's why I called to ask if you could meet sometime." "Ah, what unfortunate timing." Japan's #1 pro let out a sigh. "I have been searching as well, and I believe I've found one. Quite literally ran into him. He's impressed me enough that I believe I've found the one to pass on my legacy to." Silence hung heavily on the line, and Mirai took a moment to compose himself before he answered. "I see," Mirai responded, all former nostalgia lost with this new tidbit of information. "And you won't consider my own candidate at all?" "Only if the young man I have chosen refuses the offer," All Might admitted, though he prayed that wouldn't be the case. "If that happens, then I promise you, Mirai, that your candidate will be the first that I will wish to meet." The blonde sat down and considered his next words. I'm sorry, Mirai, I know you would not have chosen this person lightly, and I am sure they will become a wonderful hero on their own, but the young man that I met, he has everything I'd want in a successor. If you met him yourself, I'm sure you'd agree. Does he now? Sir Knight Eye sighed. If working for the #1 hero had taught him anything, it was how formidable the man's stubbornness was, but for Midoriya's sake, he should at least try. Sad to hear that. I hoped you would hear me out at least. Midoriya at least deserves a chance, Yagi-san. All Might froze in place. Hold on. Midoriya? As in Midoriya Izuku? Does he have really fluffy green hair and diamond-shaped freckles? Middle school kid, looks kind of scrawny but turns out he has a mean right hook. What? He does great analysis work for several pros, and does great impressions of you, Sasaki continued, before something seemed to click in his mind. Wait, how do you know that he's got a mean right hook? Toshinori elected to ignore that. Cries a lot? Instinctively tackles you when you try to run away. The silence hung in the air between them, until Sasaki let out a snort and started to giggle. I do believe we've both been had all might. Toshinori managed to contain his first sputter, but that only lasted a few more seconds. Both men broke down and became paralyzed with an outburst of laughter. Like men that had crawled from the desert and into a pool of cool water, they reveled in it until their throats were hoarse and their bellies ached. White Mage at Rat God, considering that it's just a pair of fractured wrists, it would be logistically easier to just have Midoriya and MT Lady come to us once the hospitals discharge them. White Mage, that way they can nap it out after I've healed them here. Rat God, sounds good. I'll make the arrangements. Diggy hole, please fill out the forms properly the first time, boss. Rat God, I did. I just showed you the second forms first. Like his time in the sports festival's announcer's booth, Izuku once again felt that he didn't belong here. Mizudafu General Hospital was no small facility, and so it had several wings. Pediatrics had a whole wing to itself, and there was the quirk assessment and treatment wing, and the wing he was in now was the ward's wing for people expecting to be at the hospital a while. More importantly, though, the top floor of that wing had the hero ward, a reserved ward with a permanent security detail with its private rooms and sterile walls. True to its name, heroes needing treatment found themselves here. And him, for some reason. He could imagine Inui reaching for his Nerf gun, but Izuku still felt like he had lied to get into here. I don't have a hero license after all. There was a hiss of pneumatics as the door was pushed open, and Izuku looked up from his phone as he spotted Emi Lady walking in, her hero costume replaced by a white hospital gown top and blue hospital scrub pants similar to his, her right arm in a sling and purple cast. Even with titanic scale bones, the heroine's ulna had suffered a fracture when she had put her arm between Izuku and the sludge villain. Looks like a missin' out on a training day, huh? She smiled, her Kansai accent now out in the open, with no effort on her part to hide it. Izuku had heard snippets of it when she had gotten stressed during the fighting, and oh, he was giving away his thoughts again, wasn't he, because Emi Lady was laughing at him now. I mean, I was born in Kutengo, so is it really that surprising I speak with a Kansai dialect? He could feel the tips of his ears heat and turn bright red along with his cheeks. And oh, I just, I don't talk like that in public. MD Lady finished for him. Izuku nodded. Reason for that is easy. I didn't want to end up being treated like some kind of country hick when I moved here, So when I made the move, I didn't just change postcodes. Why yeah, that makes sense. Image is very important for a hero after all, Izuku nodded. And I'm still sorry about your arm, lady. If I had been faster, I'll find some way of making it up to you. Nah, don't you worry about it, kid. That's what I signed up for when I decided to be a hero. She grinned. Say, you know what? I think I know how you could make it up to me. The lady walked over to his side table and picked up the notepad that had sat there, along with a pen. Could I please get an autograph? Izuku's face went red. You see? You. She grinned. Huh. The lady swirled her finger through the air, laying out the strokes to write down her name. Make my autograph out to you, as in gentleness, please? I'd really like to, but... What's the matter, kid? You pet her head to one side as the greenet's face steadily went redder and redder. He finally raised his right hand, still wrapped in a plaster cast. You slapped herself, blushing in embarrassment. I totally forgot about that. Green, I'm so sorry. Our hero fights. 8:49 News Mystery Hero Kid, the UA analyst from the sports festival? Submitted 2 hours ago by Birdwatcher 000. Hey folks. You all know I usually cover Hawks, but this one's pretty special. Look at this picture, taken from the villain attack in Muzutafu this afternoon. The mystery hero kids for some reason in a middle school uniform, sure, but compare this picture from the UA second year's sports festival and tell me that isn't the same person. If that isn't the UA analyst kid, I'm finding out who it really is and donating to him his pick of my Hawks merch collection. Izuku glanced over as a red foot-long feather poked through the gap between the windows and curled in on itself to undo the latch. You know, if heroes weren't a thing, you'd have made one scary assassin Hawks. Takami Kigo let out a little splutter as he slipped into the room, shooting a grin at Izuku sitting up in his bed, a phone in his hand. The blonde hero slipped the infiltrating feather back into his wing, eyeing the boy in the hospital bed. Shouldn't you be asleep? Shouldn't you be in Tokyo? Izuku countered. Hawks held up his hands, showing empty palms, in mock surrender. Wow, kid, did you lose your respect for your elders in that villain fight? You know, if we hurry, we might be able to find it and surgically reattach it. Izuku giggled as he closed his notebook and slid out of bed while Hawks closed the window behind him. In all fairness, Hawks hadn't come uninvited. The blonde, once he had heard the words, Aldra Middle School, in relation to the sludge villain incident, had filled Izuku's DMs with questions. If he was involved, and if so, if he was okay, and if so, did he get any cool new scars, was he in hospital, about visiting hours, and if he was busy. The winged hero blindsided Izuku with the hug. Izuku felt his head getting ruffled. What was it with his heroes ruffling his hair? And felt Hawk's chin rest on his head. Geez, kid, you can't just go running at villains without a plan like that. I was literally the only one with a plan in that fight, Hawks. Izuku deadpanned into his black and yellow shirt. Definitely going to need to get your ego checked, too. The doctors might have left it a little too overinflated. The blonde slowly pushed Izuku out to hold him at arm's length, before he settled down into a crouch, taking an index finger and poking Izuku on the nose as if he were trying to pop a balloon. His eyes drifted down to the red cast around Izuku's wrist. Oh sweet, can I sign your cast too? Inko stepped off the train and made the 10-minute walk to the front doors of the hospital, arriving a few minutes before 8 in the morning with a gym bag holding a change of Izuku's clothes in hand. The nurse behind the reception desk smiled and unlocked the door, letting Inko in. She stepped inside and looked around the bare waiting room, with its dark blue seats and stark white walls. She'd be the first visitor for the day, it seemed, and the room took on a somber mood as she noticed how much less colorful it was when empty of pro. The greenette couldn't help but wonder again if she was going to have to get used to this routine. Retracing her footsteps from yesterday evening, Inko walked in to see Izuku sitting up in his bed, tapping away on his phone. Ah, Mom. He looked surprised to see her, but grinned as he held up his phone to show, was that a chat app of some kind? Recovery girl says I can come visit her when I get discharged. She can use her quirk to heal up my arm the rest of the way today. That's good to hear, sweetie. Just make sure you aren't making too much work for the staff at UA. I won't, Mom, really. Midoriya, Izu, I can't believe you're lying to your own mother like that. She sniffed. Izuku pouted, his head slumping forward. Toshinori stood with Sir Night Eye at the hospital reception as the nurse came back and gave them the bad news. There was no Midoriya Izuku currently in the hospital. He's already gone? Sir Night Eye parroted the nurse. Toshinori caught himself with that poor phrasing. The nurse's hair was patterned after the rainbow plumage of a scarlet macaw. The nurse nodded as he scanned the discharge papers. That's right, Sir Night. Midoriya-san was discharged earlier this morning by his mother. Do you know where they went? The nurse's response was a nervous smile. I'm sorry, Sir Night Eye, that is private patient information. I guess they went home. Ah, of course, Sir Night Eye nodded. In that case, we're sorry to have imposed. Toshinori nodded and let out a disappointed sigh. So much for this whole thing being a quick rip of the band-aid. Thank you for your help. Both men turned towards the entrance, and as they walked All Might fished a slender cell phone from his pocket. You said he was being trained by Nizu, right, Mirai-kun? That's right. In that case, let's get information straight from the mouse's mouth. Toshinori grinned as he placed the cell phone to his ear, hearing the line connect. Good morning, Principal Nizu. Do you happen to have Midoriya Izuku's home address? A pleasant morning to you as well, Yagi-kun. I do have it indeed. Would this happen to be about a certain torch, perhaps? Toshinori flinched. In that rodent's quick mind. Weiss, indeed it is. A fine candidate, though perhaps he might refuse, Nizu answered. I trust that he will be able to keep your secret safe. To be clear, threats will be unnecessary, and I will be very disappointed to hear of you making any. Toshinori gulped, already regretting making this call. Yes, of course, Principal Nizu. After the frantic villain attack yesterday, Death Arms had a good feeling about today's morning patrol. He basked in the early morning sun, trailing behind the group of elementary kids walking to school, returning waves from some and smiles from others. Pro-heroes getting up and walking around, keeping an eye on kids walking to school was one of the most effective ways for a hero to spend their mornings. It was a time to be seen by the public, keep kids from turning truant, even run into other pros doing their rounds. Someone once spitballed a statistic that something like 60% of hero team-ups started with meetings during their morning rounds. Death Arms. Pro-hero Death Arms. And 80% of unplanned interviews also started during this same time. Death Arms kept his face carefully in neutral as he turned around to face the reporter. Yeah, is something the matter? Pleased to meet you, Death Arms. I'm Mimi Megumi, representing the Mizudafu Heroic Herald. I was wondering if you had a moment to talk about the villain attack yesterday afternoon. Oh boy, here we go. I suppose, if you can keep up with the kids I'm escorting, sure. What do you have to ask? Do you have any comments or thoughts about last night's villain attack in downtown Mizudafu? Death Arms nodded. He'd prepared for this, of course. I and all the heroes are glad that almost everyone got out relatively unharmed and the villain was apprehended without anyone being seriously hurt. I think the only hospital-worthy injury was MT Lady's forearm, and that's something that would heal completely in a matter of weeks, if not sooner if medical quirks become involved. What do you have to say about a middle schooler taking charge of the situation? Well, practicing in front of the mirror early in the morning was about to pay off. Death Arms smiled for the camera as he suddenly stopped walking, forcing the reporters to overshoot and come back to him. The kid wasn't in charge. Pro-heroes on the scene were just following his plan and he was coordinating us so that we could focus on individual tasks. The reporter stalled for a moment, and he could almost imagine the grinding gears in her head. Well, look at it this way. The heroes on the scene weren't letting him take command like, say, an officer in the JSDF would have command over their subordinates. Death Arms explained, flicking his headband back up and starting to walk again. What the kid was doing was giving us ideas and observations with his quirk analysis. I wouldn't be surprised if he had some kind of sensory or analysis-type mental quirk, and that insight helped the heroes make decisions that ultimately saved the day. And what do you have to say about the kid throwing himself at the villain towards the end of the fight, right as All Might was about to appear? The reporter persisted, dodging a telephone pole to keep up. Would you call that reckless? At the time, nobody had any idea that All Might was coming until he actually arrived. Death Arms shrugged at the question. So yeah, with the benefit of hindsight you could say the kid was reckless in doing so, but every pro's had a moment where things have gone to heck and all that was left was to charge in and stop a middle school child, the hostage, not the kid, from suffocating. He held up his hand before the reporter could fit in another question, the much smaller woman. Almost bouncing off him as he suddenly stopped. The kid kept himself in the backlands right up until the end of the incident, freeing up heroes to confront the villain with firefighting. Since he had experience with the villain beforehand, he let us know that we were working on a time limit. The hostage was being suffocated, and the villain was trying to escape once Backdraft got involved. And that's when the child stepped in? Mimi Megumi trailed behind the pro, recorder outstretched as they continued with the questions. Death Arms considered stopping or speeding up, but instead focused on answering the question. The kid didn't try to engage the villain directly. He was well behind backdraft for most of the fight, and only got the hostage out so that All Might could get a clean punch in. Why weren't other heroes able to do that? The pro did stop this time, and turned around to face the reporter, and this time she did bounce off his chest. They were occupied. I and several other heroes were stuck keeping the crowd back, or were already engaged in firefighting like Slugger was. Then there was Backdraft and MP Lady, who were both already actively fighting with the villain. The kid didn't charge the villain alone after all. Flustered, Mimi got in one last question to Death Arms. And what do you have to say about Kite Man's complaints that several heroes just let the middle schooler take over? Death Arms' face darkened at that. I'd say that the kid was doing a better job of controlling the situation than Kite Man was. Inko rolled up her sleeves as she turned on the webcam and glanced at one of the monitors on her rig. Now that everything was warmed up, she hit a button on the deck and switched modes. She went through the startup tests, blinking and closing her mouth as she made sure the puppeteering software was working like she had left it, mapping her movements to that of her three-dimensional virtual avatar. The bark brown woman that appeared in her place mirrored her movements as she moved her arms around. A willowy dryad, with bright yellow eyes, peeking out from her head of leaves, broad and layered along long thin vines. Inko's online persona, the virtual streamer Florinina Moriyama. There was a moment where the camera adjusted, and as she slipped on her headset she hit a button and changed the scene from standby to live. Good morning, chat. I hope everyone's been well. As Sir Night Eye and All Might arrived at the Carusan apartment block, both had the same thought as they stepped into the elevator and pressed the button on the panel inside. We should have considered the fact that the Midoriyas might have day jobs and wouldn't be at home, Toshinori whispered as he leaned towards his former sidekick. Yes, we should have, Sir Night Eye nodded. So, where next if this doesn't work out? The two heroes considered things, for a moment, before the blonde raised a finger. We could always make another house call later. This afternoon. As bad as that is, at least that's something of a plan, sighed Knight. Nizu said that it was apartment 501, right? That's right, All Might's former sidekick nodded, before pointing at the nameplate on the door and looking at the blonde. Oh look, a clue. Toshinori was confused for a moment before reading the nameplate, and couldn't help but bark out a laugh before he pushed the doorbell. Fuyumi tapped away at the keyboard of her laptop, filling out the quiz coming up for the kids. She was getting used to the feel of this new job, finally. While she had been trained as a teacher, she was supposed to be an elementary school teacher, not a middle schooler. Between the scarcity of teachers and the sudden departure of Ueda-sensei, Aldra Middle School was desperate enough that they were willing to train her on the fly, though she had initially been puzzled at why she was given a third-year class instead of a younger group. Then she was told about the quirkless Midoriya and it all suddenly made a lot more sense. Nobody wanted to deal with him. Well, that just meant that it was time to roll up her sleeves. She hammered away the keyboard with gusto, the very tip of her tongue sticking out from between her lips as she concentrated on the screen, kana flying up onto the white page as she got into the flow. Excuse me, Todoroki-sensei? Fuyumi stopped and looked up from her laptop, her mind plucking the girl's name from the class roster easily. Ah, Sajiri-chan, how can I help you? I was wondering about what happened to Midoriya-kun. Why wasn't he in class today? Bakugo-kun too. Ah, she's not guessing, just asking. That's a good sign. A few had already fielded the theory that the two boys had gotten into a fight. Which was true, but it wasn't just the two of them that had been in that fight. There was a villain attack yesterday. Both got involved, Fuyumi explained, and held up a hand as Sajiri's face drained of color. They're both alright but in hospital for today. They should be back before you know it. Her face became the picture of relief in a way that almost made Fuyumi laugh. Such an expressive girl. Ah, that's good to hear. Didn't you see it? News about it was all over the news, you know? Fuyumi craned her neck to one side, thinking about that footage. On one hand, Midoriya had handled that situation incredibly well. On the other hand, she was worried sick for him when she saw him being led onto the ambulance in the post-fight footage. Was this what seeing Shudo on the news would be like? Fuyumi couldn't help but put her younger brother in that fight, imagining him either as one of the heroes or being drowned in that thick sludge. That sent shivers up her spine, and it was nothing to do with the cold. No, I was at cram school yesterday and, well, I didn't have time to check the news, sensei. Fuyumi looked up from her pensive thoughts and offered a small, encouraging smile for the wispy-haired student. Well, see if you can't spare a moment to check the news every now and again, Sajiri-chan. Situational awareness happens at multiple scales, you know. Oh, that's right. Sajiri bowed. Thank you for the talk, Todoroki-sensei. I'll see you tomorrow. Recovery Girl told herself that she was just fulfilling a healer's obligation to grumble about every unreasonable thing requested of them, chastising the patient about his injury and making sure that he knew how lucky he was. After all, wasn't she such a kind and thoughtful doctor to be cutting around the signatures? Lesser healthcare providers would have just gotten on with it, and all he'd get otherwise was an efficient straight-line cut that would have obliterated so many of the autographs. That hadn't stopped her from adding her own signature to the cast before she had started grinding away with the cast saw in the first place. She leaned back, satisfied with her work, and let Izuku itch at his wrist as he let out a relieved sigh. I hope that you remember more than the autographs, young man, but also the fact that you broke your wrist. Recovery Girl shot the red-faced teen an amused smirk as she dropped the cast into a brown paper bag. You might be young and think yourself invincible, but remember that there's a whole world of villains out there ready to remind you otherwise. Yes, Recovery Girl. Thank you for your help. Izuku bowed in thanks and walked over to one of the wash stations, running his hand underneath the tap and scrubbing away at it. Now you next, lass. Recovery Girl whirled around, turning on the saw and making the blonde jump in surprise. Sure thing, Recovery Girl. Lady stuck out her arm and waited patiently as the doctor set about applying the oscillating saw and cutting a much straighter line through her cast. Unlike Izuku's, the purple cast was immediately tossed into a bin and Lady joined him in scrubbing her forearm under the cool water at a sink. Flora is away X3. Slow mode enabled. Golden Giant 8, just got back. What happened? Headache. Flora's gone ifk. Compass. Flora's ifk. Twerp. Fun facts dispenser. She left in a hurry. Did something happen? She's understand. Is someone else in the house doing a cooking stream and did they set something on fire? Rez, the crony, sounded like someone was at Flora's door and she had to go. Hijui, it didn't seem like she was expecting it. Jesus, didn't she say earlier in the stream that someone she knew was involved in a villain attack the other day? Rez hi. Oh really? Hope they're all okay. Madirema, yeah, same here. Niza picked up the phone and tapped it to speaker mode. Sir Knight, so nice of you to call. Perhaps we were a little imprecise with our earlier inquiry, Principal Nizu. Could you confirm that Midoriya Izuku is in fact on your campus? Niza grinned. Yes, he is. I see. Would it be possible for us to come over and meet him? Absolutely. I'll have you both added to the visitors whitelist. Thank you, Principal Nizu. He should be available after the combat exercise is over. Combat exercise? Once the two had been cleared by Recovery Girl, Izuku and Lady had made their next stop at the teacher's lounge, away from the student population. Both the heroine and the middle schooler had settled down for a quick meal in the little kitchenette tucked away at the corner of the bullpen-style teacher's office. It had been one part bowls of anegi-dan, and one part being grilled about his middle school career and a lesson in social evasion courtesy of Lady. Then the two had a quick once-over of the schedule with Present Mike and Midnight, who were supervising the full-contact combat exercise that the teachers were running at Izuku's suggestion. Izuku himself, to his surprise, was skipping school and sitting at UA, much like Aizawa-sensei had feared earlier this week. The hero had stepped in, locked eyes with Izuku, and said, "Don't let this become a habit, Midoriya. Academic education is also important." He then turned around without further explanation. Well, it's not like he asked to be attacked by a villain and medically invalidated from going to school yesterday. 2 hours later, and the exercise was starting to wind down. Lady's large sweeping attacks are good at fending off Harusan's approach. I'm not seeing any technique to Lady's movements, though. Did she ever get hand-to-hand training at her hero school? Izuku muttered to himself as he watched. She's keeping mobile enough that the spiral pattern blasts aren't able to cover the distance, which is a weakness on Harusan's part. The helical path is much slower than a direct line. On Spiral Haru? He wrote on his notepad. Izuku sat in the control room, sipping on a bottle of green tea from the vending machines as his gaze flickered over the dozen or so camera feeds that were being poured out of the array of screens in front of him. The return to routine was comforting in a way. Togata-senpai's attacking from awkward angles, but he's not landing hits that matter. It was interesting to depermeate inside of her ankle to try and throw her balance off after experimentation with the recoil effect, but the mass difference is too great. He let the words flow, the microphone in front of him catching every word as he watched the assembled Class 2A trying to capture Empty Lady, simulating a runaway office building. Amajiki-san's use of squid ink to blind her worked for a while, but again the scale factor is a problem. It's too liquid to stay on her after she blinked it away. Research animals with a natural clotting agent to modify the squid ink? Could that even work? Good thing, though, since having MT Lady trip and fall would end the exercise in short order. Tate-san's going for heavier shields. I wonder if that's further draining on him? Would he have used sharper shields had M Lady been a real villain? Izuku flicked to a new set of cameras as combat moved to the next block over. Heard her away from the school building, guys? He groaned, watching a lady plowed through a playground and yelping in surprise as she stepped on a low wall shaped like a row of Lego pieces. Having owned Lego sets, All Might themed, naturally, Izuku winced in sympathy as Lady shrieked in pain and hopped around on one foot. Recovery Girl didn't take pressure off the ice pack she was pressing to the student's knee when she looked up to the opening door. Her triage training fell flat as she saw the two most hopeless cases walk into the room. Yagi-kun and Mirai-kun, she huffed. It's been a while since you've been here. Greetings, Recovery Girl. The blonde answered cheerfully, waving an arm. The greenette bowed instead. Good afternoon, Recovery Girl. The UA alumni both bowed to the hard-working medic, who looked both over. I take it neither of you have had any injuries that I need to see to? She queried, only half joking. They both shook their heads in an oddly synchronous movement. We were looking for Midoriya Izuku, actually. Oh, and what about? Both glanced at each other, then back to Recovery Girl, then at the student, who promptly cowered at the sudden attention. Recovery Girl's mouth flattened to a line. My office. Now. Izuku jumped as the door burst open, his notes almost falling from his fingers as he whirled around to find two people in the doorway. I am here. And you are a spectacularly difficult person to find, young Midoriya. A familiar voice called out, full of boisterous cheer despite sounding like Mike Sensei after a session of tag. Now, Izuku had expected one of a dozen or so possible visitors, Principal Nizu, one of the other teachers, or any of a handful of students who had already been tagged out of the exercise. Both All Might, in his shrunken form, and Sir Night-Eye, the latter in his full hero outfit? The dynamic duo, reunited after being separated for the better part of a decade? Yeah, he hadn't been expecting them at all. The greenette could only stare as he stood up out of his seat like it had suddenly caught fire. But... His gaze swept across to the other man in the doorway, then back to the blonde. I appreciate your discretion. Mirai-kun is very much aware of my, condition. As he was nodding, Izuku moved his fingers to the control panel. Without breaking eye contact, he quietly brushed his fingers over the controls to stop his note-taker recording and muted the mics in the room to prevent any conversation from being transmitted. Call it a gut feeling, but something in Izuku was telling him that this wasn't something that Nijire was supposed to hear. Sir Night-Eye looked like he noticed this, because he smiled and nodded from behind All Might. Midoriya-kun, pardon us for the intrusion. You're all healed up, I take it? He started, glancing over at the wrist that he had fractured. Izuku nodded, not trusting in his voice just yet. Of course, he is, Recovery Girl saw to him after all. All Might laughed, throwing up a thumb, before leaning in and stage whispering. You are all right, young Midoriya? The greenette, overwhelmed, nodded again. That's good to hear. You can imagine my surprise when I saw you wading through the heroes and into that sludge villain. I thought I'd left you on that rooftop. There were stairs, Izuku explained, before his deadpan tone caught up to him and he clapped his hands over his mouth. Sir Night-Eye let out a choked laugh, before turning away and using his fingertips to push up his glasses. All Might took it in stride, chuckling hoarsely as he grinned broadly. There were indeed young Midoriya. All Might laughed off graciously, brushing away Izuku's gaffe like it was a fleck of dandruff in his hair. Did All Might have dandruff? It had always been such a huge problem with. Focus, Izuku, focus. For you, a student with not a lot of training, almost no experience, and no combat quirk to back you up? After I had told you that heroes had to be willing to risk their lives? I have to say, seeing how thoroughly you demonstrated your conviction to match your answer in action as well as words was quite humbling, the blonde continued. Izuku gawked. Humbling? From All Might? He glanced at Sir Night-Eye, because this had to be a joke, right? And that is why I am here to thank you, and also apologize. All Might declared, and Izuku's jaw hit the floor so fast that it bounced right back up to clack back into place. He all but leaped to his feet. Wait, no, there's nothing to be sorry for. You were over your time limit, and, well, I grabbed your leg when you leaped. You never mentioned that part, Sir Night-Eye turned, and the blonde began to sweat even harder. I wasn't talking about that part, the skeletal form of All Might interrupted, smiling ruefully as he found a chair and sat down on it. I was talking about how I lectured you about being willing to risk your life to save people, and yet, what could I have called it but arrogance and hypocrisy when I held myself back because of a time limit? His fingers steepled as he spoke, hunched over and fighting down a cough. Young man, that day you showed me that you were willing to put your money where your mouth is. That you've also found a place among the heroes here at UA is also nothing short of incredible for any middle schooler. Sir Night-Eye nodded behind All Might, smiling briefly. Not to mention your work with the heroes of Muzutafu and beyond. Yes. You've already done so much. All Might's smile widened as he spread his palms, holding them up towards the greenet, and that's why I'm here. The blonde's words went in one ear and out the other as Izuku froze up and his mind raced. Am I going to have to turn down an internship offer from All Might? Please, gods, don't make me have to turn down an internship offer from All Might. Or maybe I could accept and just force Nizu's hand. But because it's All Might, that's why. It took him a moment to realize that both men were looking at him expectantly. They had been talking, hadn't they? I think I must have spaced out for a second there, Izuku gulped. I'm sorry, All Might, but could you say that again? That's quite all right. I didn't believe it the first time, anyway. All Might chuckled good-naturedly. I said that I'd like to offer you my quirk, young Midoriya. Welcome to UA Tech Support. This is Powerloader speaking. How may I help you today? Hey, Powerloader. Snipe swiped his card again and let the sharp error beep sound through to his colleague. Any reason my ID card won't let me open the observation room up? There was a sign on the line, and then a grumble as Powerloader began typing. Probably the rat locking people out again. That would be correct. Snipe, Midoriya-kun needs a moment for some sensitive conversation, so I've disabled access for now. A third voice butted into the line. Snipe let the sound of Powerloader cursing and dropping his phone fade before answering. Alright, Principal, the kid's safe, right? Jesus. Rest assured that if that ever changes, you will be the first to know, Snipe. Snipe let out an accepting grunt. Much obliged, Boss Rat. As All Might's words echoed around in his head, Izuku stared at the number 1 pro hero with his mind racing until he felt like his thoughts were a blur as they went by. Yet there was a distinct feeling that it was screeching to a halt at the same time. Once he had finally gathered himself, his first thought was, All Might wants to give me his quirk? The rest were yelling like Hadu-senpai had been as they tumbled by, cackling, into the depths of his brain. He thought back to his programming discussions with Powerloader and Nizu, and how they had gone into a tangent about how a computer could be locked into an endless loop, using up computational resources and yet achieving nothing. Bad code executing endlessly in a spiral of infinite recursion. Yeah, it kind of felt like that right now. The greenet closed his eyes and took a breath to calm himself. He went over what All Might had said and examined the pro-hero's words again and again, 10, 20, 30 times over in his head. This wasn't a joke. It couldn't be. Izuku discarded his sudden flash of anger that came with the thought of the offer being a joke of some kind. Sir Nightie's sensibilities, both comedic and professional, wouldn't take things this far. The investigation-centric pro took pride in proving that weak quirks didn't make a weak hero. His two senior sidekicks were examples of that, and the man knew that the boy in front of the dynamic duo was quirkless. While the serious-faced man was a confusingly contradictory mixture of wacky and strict, the pro-hero was not a malicious man. His disdain for certain prank shows was proof of that, and his simple yet strict definition of good clean shenanigans had endeared him further to Izuku. Compared to Sir Night-Eye, All Might was a relative stranger. Despite being Izuku's inspiration for all these years, he was aware, thanks Mom, that this man knew nothing about the boy in front of him, but he was All Might. He was the #1 pro. And only yesterday, the two had spoken about his goals. All Might had learned about Izuku's dream from their conversation on that rooftop, and there was just no motive for the blonde to lie to him about something so big. So why? Remember, just because someone isn't lying doesn't mean that they're not wrong. Trust, but verify, Nizu's lecturing voice whispered. Witness statements and information gathering had taught him that maxim, to take on information in good faith, but to make sure that it was correct information as well. A quirk. The greenet let out a long, shaky breath, making an effort to gather himself up as he placed his palms on his knees, then looked up at All Might. You two are being honest, right? We are here with a serious offer, Midoriya-kun. Sir Night-Eye nodded, along with All Might. I appreciate you taking this with equal gravity. Izuku nodded and took a breath, squeezing his eyes shut. Do you know what kind of offer would mean to a quirkless kid, if he believes you? Yes, I do, and I understand perhaps far better than you might think, young Midoriya. You obviously have questions. I don't expect you to believe me at face value and accept the offer without asking them. He's much smarter than that, Sir Night-Eye drawled with a small smile, and much too curious. Izuku offered a bashful smile back, but turned his attention to All Might. I do, actually. Of course I'd have questions. I mean, you've always been secretive about your quirk, and I won't be allowed to write this down, would I? People have been speculating about your quirk since your very first debut. Izuku quickly realized just how redundant first debut was, and bit his tongue as he flushed red and spotted Sir Night-Eye's smirk widening a millimeter. The blonde nodded, a pleasant hum coming from his throat as he shifted in his seat, reaching out and dragging another chair over for Sir Night-Eye as well. Ask away, Midoriya-kun. We've both made time to be here. The greenet nodded, taking in a breath. Okay, I know more than a few quirk analysts who would kill to be in my position. Time to make it count. First of all, why give away a quirk? Give away your quirk. Izuku started, his eyes opening as he found the words not quite tumbling from his mouth. All Might nodded, taking in a breath, and placed his palms on his knees as he too took in a breath, and then exhaled. You saw what pitiful condition my body is in, young Midoriya. These days, I only have 3 hours as a hero, and by the end of it I'm vomiting blood. Every day, I'm reminded how little time I have left, and not just as a hero. The man smiled sadly, and Izuku noticed Sir Night-Eye visibly start. At the reminder of the #1 heroes, his mentor's mortality. I wanted to find someone to pass this quirk on to. In fact, I see it as my duty to do so before the end. Izuku sniffled, holding back tears. I have been searching for a successor for the better part of 4 years, young Midoriya. And when I met you, who have done more than just impress Sir Night-Eye and myself, but many other pro-heroes as well. When you told me that you wanted to be a hero, it made me think about asking you to be my successor, and seeing you in action afterwards only cemented that my decision would be the right one. All Might let out a raspy cough, but didn't recover like last time. He fell into a fit of retching, and Izuku's heart clenched as he watched blood leak between the blonde's fingers and drip to the floor. You could do a lot better than me, you know, Izuku murmured, glancing down at his feet, clad in his trademark red shoes. To the contrary, I think that we could do a lot worse than you as All Might's successor, Sir Knight. I stepped in, handing All Might a fresh handkerchief. Your analysis talents aside, your physical assessment scores have been impressive to show how much you can improve in such a short time, as is your ability to assess and think through a situation like a pro hero. Actually, let me amend that, you can already approach a crisis better than some pro heroes. Combined with your other attributes, both All Might and I agreed that you were the best candidate to inherit this quirk. All Might let out a chuckle at that, and the Greenit let out a short sigh. Izuku was tempted to raise an eyebrow at that interaction but nodded, his knees trembling at their words. Two of his childhood heroes heaping so much praise on him like this? It was almost unbearable. He didn't. The ghost of a Nerf dart hitting the side of his neck jerked him out of the thought. He stopped thinking and focused on listening to the two pros. I've seen many heroes, both students and licensed pros, and rarely have I been as impressed so thoroughly, young Midoriya. All Might smiled. What got me started was your answer to me from yesterday, when I asked you, why did you want to become a hero? You said that you wanted to help people. Would that answer be the same today? The Greenit nodded again, his inner fanboy screeching that All Might remembered his words, but that was a very small, distant screech as if covered by several futon. But if you had answered, I want to become a quirkless hero, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. The blonde nodded, the weight returning to his words. I understand that that's a goal that is as noble but incompatible with my goal of finding a successor. But as you want to be a hero that helps save people, and seeing your potential as a hero in that incident yesterday, that's why I came here to make this offer. Is that a satisfactory answer? Izuku nodded, his usual stammering halted by curiosity. He was a quirk nerd, after all, and he had never heard about a quirk that could be passed on non-genetically. Surely someone would have mentioned it? Alright, next question, how? How do you even know if your quirk is transferable, All Might? I mean, there was a case of a woman in Mie Prefecture that could transfer her zero-gravity status effect to another person for a short while, but that was a temporary effect and not. Izuku paused, at a loss for words, so he settled for gesturing and then saying, this. Permanent, I mean. There was a glance shared between the two pro heroes. All Might seemed to consider for a moment before nodding. Young Midoriya, let me tell you another secret, too, in fact. The blonde leaned in closer, and Izuku nodded briefly, eyes fixed to the number 1 pro in rapt attention. Firstly, that I was born quirkless, and I'm not the first person to bear this quirk. The Greenit's eyes widened. All Might had been quirkless? The number 1 pro hero was quirkless? Chow. There's no way you're quirkless, you've got a full-body enhancer type quirk. That's the general consensus made by a bunch of nerds. You saw that it had traits of a transformation type quirk just yesterday. But a transferable quirk is impossible? The word died on his tongue. So was the idea of a quirk that could be passed from one user to the next, his dry and droll inner voice reminded him. Well, I was born quirkless, at least. All Might nodded at his words, glancing down towards his shoes. I still have the extra toe joint too. Izuku's eyes glanced down at All Might's feet. Bulky-looking shoes that could simply be mistaken for military-grade combat boots, but he could almost imagine that he could see the subtle difference in proportions. After all, he himself had to find the same kind of shoes for wider feet than a quirked human without the vestigial toe joint. The skeletal-looking pro straightened up in his seat and finished dabbing away specks of blood from his mouth. He stood, clutching a shaking fist to his chest as he spoke. I think a little context will help here. I know that this quirk is transferable because I'm not the first bearer of this quirk. In fact, as far as I have been able to tell with my research, I would be the 8th to bear this quirk. One for all. All Might continued, his words heavy with the weight of history. The way he spoke about his quirk, this one for all, made the hairs on Izuku's neck stand on end. My story starts much like yours. At the age of 4 I was diagnosed as quirkless, but when I was 16 I met the woman who would become my master, Shimura Nana. She was known as the pro-heroine Tempest, and when she accepted me as her student, she would be the one who mentored me through my first steps to becoming a hero. All Might recounted, a wistful nostalgia washing over his smile. Like you, when we first met she asked me why I wanted to be a pro-hero. I answered that I wanted to be a hero to save people, to become a symbol of peace in a time of violence and unrest. Shimura Nana was the seventh bearer of One for All, which I now carry with me when she passed it down to me. She died at the hands of a villain shortly after. In fact, the same one that gave me the scar when I avenged her 5 years ago, he explained, tapping his stomach and wincing in pain. And like my master before me, I have found someone that I would be willing to pass this sacred torch on to, and that is you, young Midoriya. Izuku opened his mouth, but no words came out. It felt like the world was falling apart around him again, his head rocking back as he fought with the revelation. The number one hero had been quirkless, and the quirk he now held was a one that could be passed down, transferable, and it was being offered to him. Izuku. Midoriya Izuku felt tears forming at the corners of his eyes as the true weight of their words hit him. I can stop being quirkless. Hero Fans Forum, quirk questions, general discussion, ask anything. Search tags, quirkless. A Quirked 230 asked, if you could choose to have a quirk, would you? What would it be? 653 replies, 11,814 views. Quirky Negative asked, what would be a better quirk to have? Laser vision or control of fire? 12 replies, 2,874 views. Jackson 2016 asked, does anyone know how to confirm if my quirkless diagnosis was correct? 27 replies, 1501 views. Throwaway 3211233333 asked, why was I, 15F, born quirkless but my sister, 12F, gets a quirk? 174 replies, 11,479 views. 20%er 0987 asked, if there was a button that would give you a quirk, but also kill a random person when pushed, would you press it? 4,592 replies, 28,372 views. Kenjiro 989 asked, how can I fake having a quirk? 3,662 replies, 172,264 views. Natashian 4TN4T asked, is there a cure for quirklessness? 145 replies, 261,479 views. Thread locked by staff. Midoriya? HM? Midoriya, are you okay? Izuku's eyes snapped open and he glanced around the room. 2 concerned adults were looking back at him. The greenet blushed red and bowed his head. Sorry, this is heavy. And I spaced out again. I should be the one apologizing, young Midoriya. All Might bowed his head low, far too low for the number one to be bowing to a civilian teenager. Izuku's eyes widened but the man continued to speak. It is a heavy topic indeed, and we should be giving you time and space to think. We are in no rush. You do not need to give us an answer right away. You don't need to give us an answer today, even. In saying that, would you like to continue? The blonde offered Izuku a gentle, reassuring smile which teased a smile, nervous, bashful and excited, out of the middle schooler in turn. He nodded eagerly. I don't know, he admitted. I've always thought that I'd need to become a pro-hero quirkless because, well, nothing like this has ever been heard of, let alone thought that I'd be offered one. That's not an accident, young Midoriya, sir. Night I nodded. Research about transferable quirks are, well, not easy to find, and that's by design. What few companies and universities have been able to start researching that aspect of quirks usually finds it classified and their papers remain off publicly available databases. That perked Izuku's interest, and the number one glanced at his former protege, who nodded back. I hope you understand how much trust one am placing in you with all this information, young Midoriya. This was done for good reason. The villain that gave me this scar was a villain known as All for One, and his quirk was to be able to give and take quirks, and he has been doing so for nearly 200 years. The reason quirk transfer research and information is so restricted was because that thread of inquiry was one of his main tools for recruiting his minions. Sir Night I nodded, stepping into the conversation again as All Might was racked by another coughing fit. It was one of his more reliable methods of increasing his power base. His recruiters would trawl forums and chat rooms for people seeking more power through quirk transfer or enhancement. Those considered to have villainous potential were contacted and brought into the fold with offers of quirks, or better quirks, that he had stolen from civilians and pro-heroes. Information was suppressed in the hopes that it would make the offers less credible and thus curtail the number of people becoming villains. That we are using the same methods right now is not lost to us, Midoriya-kun. The foresight hero pushed his glasses further up his nose with a gesture that hid his face. I would like to think that you were already on our side, to begin with, and that this is less a recruitment offer and more, how to phrase it. Mirai Sasaki scrubbed his fingers through his hair before he looked at his toes. The analogy is not perfect, but think of this as an investment, of a sort. We hope that by giving you additional resources, a quirk, the training to control it, and so on, that it'll pay off for us, for all of society, in your future career as a hero. Much like other heroes I've taken on as interns, I train their skills, their quirk, their mind and bodies, in the hopes that their actions as a pro-hero will in aggregate improve society. Izuku nodded, cautiously, his eyes already brimming with tears. I saw it yesterday, that you have so much potential, Midoriya-kun. All Might smiled gently. I think you could become a pro-hero even without One for All, but a part of me wants to see what you will be able to achieve with it. Once again, Izuku nodded. And what happens if I refuse this offer? Then this conversation is over, with no hard feelings. The last person I would give this quirk to is someone unwilling. All Might said, his face darkening as he made an effort to not let disappointment color his voice. Of course, I would ask that you keep this a secret and that you tell nobody else. The green atlet. His face set into a grim mask of seriousness. I understand. Your secret is safe with me, All Might. But even if you do not become my successor, I hope that you keep in touch as a member of our, shall we call it, conspiracy? Keep an eye out for other potential candidates, for example, or I might ask you to be a fresh set of eyes on a case. Regardless, I'd like to take you on as an intern someday, even though I'm told there's a line. Izuku blinked, then burst into tears. All Might panicked. Oh gods, are you all right, young Midoriya? Izuku sniffled, scrubbing at his demed oversensitive tear ducts with a sleeve. Why, they're happy tears. They're happy tears. Hearing All Might say that he wanted to work with him had been another surprise among surprises. I always wanted to intern with you, All Might. It was one of my dreams ever since I found out what the word intern meant. Well, you certainly weren't this excited about interning work with me, Sir Night-Eye huffed indignantly, though without heat, before chuckling to let the tension out of the room. But it's All Might, sir. Rather than another chuckle, this time Sir Night-Eye let out a full-blown laugh. Touché, Midoriya-kun. Izuku smiled as he swiped away the last of his tears. I'm not refusing your offer though. I just wanted to know. It is good to clear the air. All Might nodded once the boy had calmed down and finished cleaning his face with a napkin. Now, young Midoriya, I take it that you have more questions? Izuku nodded. Why, yeah, I still have a few more. One that I, should have asked earlier, actually. There's no worries about the transfer of the quirk. It is perfectly safe and painless. Oh, that too, but, just what is One for All? It's obviously transferable, and can act as an enhancer quirk, but what else does it do? Does it have a transformative component? It has to because you turn into. Well, All Might when you're using it and when you're not But like this. If I get it, do I blow up like a balloon and get all buff? Izuku felt agonizing pain in his fanboy heart. The secrets of All Might's quirk, the most talked about quirk in all of the hero fandom, were finally being revealed to him, and he couldn't even share the news with the others in the quirk analysis forums. Worse still, he couldn't even correct them or otherwise he'd give away what he knew. Izuku could imagine the fake internet points, the views, the upvotes, the kudos, the karma, the praise in the comments, slipping away from his grasp as he brought himself back to reality. Because the reason All Might's quirk was a mystery was more than just a hero's wish for privacy. Despite this, the #1 pro hero had given him carte blanche to ask him about any and every detail he knew about One for All. And when he asked, the Pillar of Peace had slowly, haltingly, each cough made Izuku jump, his chest twisting in sympathy as the hero forced the words from his mouth, explained his quirk. One for All is, at its core, a stockpiling quirk. Think of it as a well that is filled with water, each user digging deeper during their time, each of us adding to the reserve that it can hold, he started, all the way from the first through to the 8th, all the wielders of One for All have added their strength to this quirk. As a result, with each successor, it increases the amount of power that each user can access. Which means that I'd have your strength? Izuku's mind rushed to the possibilities. No, the greenet breathed in sudden realization, the mechanisms clicking into place. I'd be stronger. All Might must have read his face, because the blonde nodded with a satisfied smile. That's right. You'd likely build up to become even stronger than myself, if you fully master the quirk. If he wasn't already sitting on a chair, Izuku was sure he'd have ended up on his butt. While All Might's power landed him with flashy fights every other week, the analyst in training had seen the statistics and had, for an essay, honestly, mapped out that the real way the number 1 pro was saving lives, rescue work. Being able to deadlift a train had its perks so long as you minded what you were standing on, after all, and literally tearing through buildings while keeping them structurally sound, to reach victims trapped under rubble, clearing out entire highways choked with vehicles as a typhoon threatened to roll in after the worst earthquake in a decade, or simply being able to pull the door off a car and bend the metal body into a shape that would let a trapped civilian escape. Those were things that he could do if he had accepted this quirk. Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands were shaking with the possibilities this quirk would open up. And what about your transformation aspect? Is that something that came with the quirk as well? I'll be honest with you, young Midoriya, I'm not so sure. From what I've been able to research, One for All has expressed itself differently with each user, All Might continued to explain. While I found that it would enhance my strength, my master said that the way One for All truly expressed itself in her was in her speed. Her quirk, Float, had been just that, the ability to float and fall slowly. But with One for All, her vertical movement power was greatly increased, and combined with jumping from surfaces with her increased strength, she was fast, so fast. He bit back a cough with a fond smile, his mind lost in nostalgia for a moment. And as his eyes shifted from past to present, All Might regarded him with a crooked smile. This leads to my theory that One for All does more than just amplify one's strength, but also their quirk, so while I am fairly certain that it will give you the strength enhancement stockpiled by myself and the previous holders, I have no way of telling you exactly how you would be able to wield One for All. If he were to accept, Sir Knight I pointed out. If he were to accept, All Might nodded, taking the correction with grace. Izuku nodded, and teed up his next question. Apart from Tempest, from Shimura and Nana, which other pro heroes have held One for All? Only 2 other wielders were truly pro heroes, in that they held a hero license, All Might answered, and that question seemed to make the greenet rock as if he'd been bopped on the nose. Not so surprising when you consider that the idea of a licensed pro hero has only been around for, 100 years? I see. Izuku breathed, his throat tightening. A quirk that was literally older than heroes. Well, in the licensed pro hero sense, anyway. I don't suppose you've ever heard of the pro heroes Lariat and N? All Might continued. I've heard of them in passing, Izuku confirmed. Pro hero N, I'm more familiar with. He was considered one of the archetypical, modern, underground pro heroes, active about 50, 60 years ago. That would make him the 6th wielder, I'm guessing? Lariat I don't think I can remember much in detail about them, since they were one of the 2nd generation of pro heroes, but he'd be the 5th person to have One for All? Correct on both counts, young Midoriya. The greenet beamed, fighting through the feeling of fighting down his thrashing internal fanboy as he processed. The implications. The possibilities. Sir Knight Eye and All Might glanced at each other, but both pros settled into their seats and waited patiently. I'd like to take some time, All Might, Sir Knight, the boy finally said, to think things over. It's good to not rush into things, especially for something so life-changing, Sir Knight I agreed. Young Midoriya, may I have your phone for a moment? Yes. Izuku pulled it out of his pocket and unlocked his phone, before handing it over to All Might. The man tapped away on the screen, before returning it. That's my personal phone number. Please contact me once you've made a decision, one way or another. All Might returned the phone to the greenet, and the dynamic duo made a polite show of not noticing the high-pitched squealing coming from behind Izuku's sealed lips as he vibrated in place, eyes wide with excitement and jaw hanging loose in a shocked square as he marveled at the digits on his screen. All Might's phone number. Sir Night-Eye's mouth twitched into a smirk and All Might waxed nostalgic, his hand covering his mouth as he politely turned away from the sight. This looks familiar, doesn't it? All Might's eyebrows waggled at his protégé, his broad palm hiding his wide grin. He will never learn of my first internship. Sir Night-Eye glared back, though amusement danced in his eyes. The boy stood up and bowed low, and held it as he clenched his fists by his hips. Thank you, All Might, for your phone number, he stammered out, bowing deeply. I promise I won't abuse this privilege. I'm sure you won't, young Midoriya. Please, use it to contact me if you have any further questions, or if I can help you in any way. We have to go now. I'm sure I've given you a lot to think about. Izuku nodded, and squeezed his eyes shut. And thank you again, both for saving me yesterday and for this offer. The two pro-heroes returned the bows, more shallow, as was proper, but Izuku was surprised that they held their bows for so much longer than they needed to. Sir Night-Eye pushed his glasses further up his nose as he straightened up. And thank you, Midoriya-kun, for agreeing to meet us on such short notice. It's no problem, sir. All Might laughed as he turned for the door, waving goodbye as he departed. I'm sure you have a lot to think about, young Midoriya. In the meantime, we must leave. And with that flourish, the dynamic duo departed. Izuku watched as the door slowly closed behind the two pros. He went over to the security station and activated every single non-alarm lockdown in the room that he had access to, given that he was employed as a teacher's assistant. That was quite a few. Checking that they were all green, he walked over to a supply cupboard, stuck his head into the pile of clean pea uniform tops and screamed. Nizu jolted as one of the alarms rigged to Midoriya's room buzzed and a light went bright amber. The principal of UA spun in his seat and opened a camera feed. Looking at the boy go through several practice stress responses, Nizu's whiskers flickered as he gauged the boy's reaction to the recent revelations. After a moment, he was satisfied that this was within the healthy range of expected emotional reactions, and that Izuku wasn't experiencing any excessive distress considering the weight of the secrets that had dropped onto his lap, so Nizu swung around back to his computer. Remembering something, he made sure to double-check that the drainage built into the room would be sufficient to prevent flooding from Midoriya's tears. Young Midoriya is quite the hero fan, isn't he? He's not just a fan, Yagi-san, he's not just an air conditioner either. Midoriya-kun is an entire HVAC system. Toshinori burst out laughing, before sputtering with a wet cough. Midnight Sensei. Hey Midori, can you find Indie Lady from the locker rooms and bring her to classroom G144? We're doing the initial debrief there, then if you're up for it we'll do a full review for the comprehensive debrief on Monday. Sure thing, Midnight Sensei. Midnight Sensei. Oh, I've also got one of the courier bots bringing a bag of drinks to you. Nizu says you should keep hydrated and offer some to MT Lady. Izuku closed the chat app, understanding that Midnight had no way of knowing what he had just gone through. For all she knew, he'd been sitting on his chair spinning in place. Closing his eyes, Izuku took in a breath, then two, then he scrubbed his sleeve across his face and opened the door, finding the mono-wheeled bot waiting for him on the other side of the door. Its hands holding up a tray with a bag of drinks. Izuku took it and started down the corridor. There would be time to have an existential crisis later. He had work to do. You massaged her foot, still throbbing with pain after stepping on giant Lego bricks and rubble, and hoped that her socks had made it through the conflict without too many holes. It was one of her last good suits, and the fandom would be in absolute uproar if she was spotted with darned socks. Such was the life of a heroine. The blonde let out a long, tired sigh, deciding that it was time to get up and face the music. The training session had turned into a goddamn shit show, though at least the kiddos had fun. Kiddos. The blonde took a moment to facepalm again and let out a groan. Ain't these kids only 5 years younger than you are? Way to make yourself feel old. She tried to not stew in her shame. After all, if it weren't for her literally massive quirk advantage, The second-year students could have probably taken her down in an one-on-one fight where it was purely down to combat skill. Those UA students were something else, with their training and coordination. When deployed in teams of 4, the hero teams had been so dynamic and relentless, fully embodying the plus-ultra attitude their school touted, and that was without the Green Bean's help. It had been the steady mantra of "what would Greenie do" that had kept her going, feeding her a steady stream of ideas to fight off the packs of students that had hounded her through the fake city. Just knowing that her first intern was watching her, how could any lady disappoint one of her fans like that, right? And you used him like a crutch? Which of the two of you is the adult here, anyway? You pouted, puffing her cheeks as she did so as she threw her hero costume into a duffel bag. Maybe I should ask if he's planning on forming a hero team when he's finished with UA? If I can keep my license for that long. MD Lady fixed her mask before stepping out of the changing room, having swapped her hero costume for a UA sports uniform, given as a souvenir by Midnight, the sweetie, and nearly ran over the intern she had just been thinking about. "Whoa, didn't see ya there, kid." You yelped, chuckling as the flustered boy jumped back a step. "Ah, MD Lady. Midnight Sensei said you'd be around here. She says she's taking care of the debrief with the students, going over the training footage." He smiled, before hefting the fabric bag in his hand. "I got sent to grab you some drinks. There's water, green tea, and some fruit juice packs. If you want some, The appearance of drinks suddenly reminded you that she was thirsty, and the Miniyama hero nodded as she leaned down to rummage through the offered bag. As she began rummaging, the heroine popped up a green tea, seemed appropriate, given his head of hair, and offered it to him. "You want a drink yourself, kid?" The kid seemed to make the connection and gave her a wry smile. "Ah, yes, I actually need to get some more water." "Oh yeah, you gotta keep yourself hydrated, don't ya?" You flashed him a grin and cracked open a bottle marked with strawberries and cubes of nata de coco, chugging down a mouthful of the sweet drink and chewing on the gel as she walked. The blonde let out a satisfied sigh as she capped the bottle again, and followed in the greenet's wake as he took the lead to their next destination. "The training exercise gave me a lot of ideas about your style and your quirk, MT Lady." Midoriya's smile was dazzling, and the blonde kept her laughter down as he excitedly rummaged in a documents case and pulled out a notebook. "I actually wrote down a few questions for you to quickly answer, just to make sure that your quirk works the way I think it does. The key questions I've highlighted, like is your quirk binary state or can you transform on a spectrum? I also wonder, is gigantification turn big or grow? Because those have implications on what we can do with your quirk. I want to see that application used for times where you need to be bigger, but not big. Like, in case you still need to have your fingers stay small enough to pick up a motorcycle and not crush one, as well as being able to fight in tight spaces while still making the most of your quirk." Yu's mind boggled at the questioning. She nodded mutely, and wondered if the greenet even saw her as he continued. "Also, I have a few exercises so that we can get measurements and statistics on your quirk factors characteristics. How fast can you switch from small to big to small, for example? If we determine that it might really help with things like jumping up onto rooftops, you grow big, grab the top of the roof and jump up, and if you can shrink faster than you fall, then that'll do wonders for your mobility." You tried to make sure she didn't look like a stunned fish as she was handed an open notebook, which had a quick sketch of her, flattering of course, but she could see the drawing's focus was around her mask, her boots, and lastly her gloves, along with little annotations here and there. Her gaze flickered over the rest of the notes, the questions and the conclusions drawn from her running battle with the UA students that mostly raised even more questions about how her quirk worked, sparking her own curiosity and a little shame. Why hadn't any of my teachers asked these questions? Why haven't I asked any of these questions? I've had this quirk for nearly 20 years and the kids taking it apart in 2 hours. Finally, she settled on one last note and read it. She read it again. "Wait, what? What's an unspiral Hadu?" You asked, and the kid seemed to jump as he heard that question. That's one of the students in the class you fought. I must have written something about her down on your page. I am so sorry about." The blonde laughed, playfully waving him down before he went into a full-blown panic ramble. "Hey, don't worry, kid. You were probably doing this while you were watching the fighting, right?" "Why, yeah, but still." You shot him a wry smile when he glanced back at her. So hey, kid, lots of room to improve, right? In some areas, sure, the greenet answered. Then to her surprise, the UA analyst kid gave her a bright grin. I think you did great, though, seeing as you were trying to fight as a hero. Oh. I mean, if you had been a real villain, you could have easily dropped a building on the students, or slapped them out of the air when they jumped you, the kid started, tucking away the bag of drinks and pulling out a notebook, scrawled with his notes, it seemed. Instead, you restrained the amount of collateral damage you did, and I saw you pulling a lot of your punches when you did connect an attack with a student. It was amazing, seeing how much self-control you had even when you were getting barraged with attacks. Yu's thoughts drifted as she thought about it. Yeah, that had been true, hadn't it? I mean, your biggest challenge was Hadu-senpai, the girl with the spiral attacks and flight. Not that the other 2A students were pushovers or anything like that. There were several times where you could have easily slapped her into a building, but instead you blew her away with wind pressure attacks instead. Then there was also that one time you got behind a building and shrunk down. It was great use of your quirk and tactically changing your size. That's where I got the idea about jumping up buildings with size changes. I made sure to save a clip of Togata-senpai's face when you jump-kicked him. That got a snort of laughter from her. Yu grinned, a warmth returning to her chest as he continued to ramble about how great she was. There was a pang of guilt that she was listening to a kid to soothe her ego, but then again, that kid had been the linchpin to take down that sludge villain yesterday, right? Because, hey, if the kid thought she did well, she couldn't be that bad of a heroine, right? Midnight scrolled back again, and the classroom erupted into good-natured heckling as Mirio rounded the corner and got 2 feet to the face courtesy of M'Lady, launching him backwards before the heroine had puffed up to titanic size and started trying to play whack-a-mole with Amajiki. Alright class, lesson learned. Hadu-chan. Size shifters don't always stay big during combat, sensei. Exactly. M'Lady got a good hit in there, and almost knocked you out of the fight if you weren't a close combat monster, Togata-kun. With a flourish of her whip, Midnight flicked the classroom's attention back to herself. We will of course do a full review on Monday's heroics class, but I have homework for all of you. 1 page of things you could have done better, and 1 page of things your partner did well. Footage will be available on the student portal in the usual places. Remember that this is confidential information, so no posting the footage on HeroTube. She rode out the ripple of laughter from the scruffy and exhausted class, her smile widening as she spotted a flash of green hair peeking out at her from the door at the back of the classroom. And well, if it isn't the heroes of the hour. Class, now's your time to ask MT Lady for autographs, ask any questions you might have, and hey, special thanks to Midori here for organizing the event. Heads turned and Hadu shot out of her seat as she spotted Midoriya, waving frantically at him as if she wasn't immediately noticeable. Watching the young heroine and the younger student get mobbed by their respective fans, Midnight laughed and waded in, bringing order to the chaos of 2A. The two entered the lift, having ordered quietly at a soba restaurant, and took the bowls across the road and into Sir Nitai's agency building. Both were exhausted, today had been quite the runaround, and neither had the chance to get lunch. Hey, Mirai-kun. Yes, Yagi-san? Tashinori held out his hand, offering it with his palm up. Will young Midoriya accept one for all? Sir Nitai looked at the hand, smirked slightly, and adjusted his glasses. That would be spoilers, all might. The elevator dinged to their destination, and Sir Nitai bellowed at his employees, both pro-heroes, the blonde in turn, and his support staff, as he approached. We're under attack, All Might is throwing bowls of soba at people. I am here with a late lunch. Shrill screaming filled the room. Midoriya was sipping on another bottle of green tea when the door to the room opened and Shota stepped into the room, followed closely behind by Midnight. He stopped and waved before returning to his screens, setting up the uploads of the combat footage for the students to review by Monday. I think we need to investigate MT Lady's educator, the analyst said without preamble, his face remaining firmly fixed to the screen as he continued to work. Midnight dropped into another office chair and pushed over to join him. Something caught your eye, Midoriya-kun? Putting aside her size, MT Lady doesn't fight like someone who got more than a foundational amount of combat and quirk development training. When I asked some of the questions I had about her quirk, she didn't seem to have trained or even considered basics like quirk activation and reset time. The Greenit murmured, pushing down his guilt at giving such a negative assessment of the heroine. Normally a hero school would be expected to not only give her basic training, but also help her develop a unique fighting style to make the most of her quirk. That's what makes a hero school a hero school. It's fundamental to heroics. I thought she always had an amateurish fighting style. Shota settled into a seat next to him and quietly thanked the boy when he pulled out a jelly packet blueberry from the shopping bag full of drinks that he had on the desk. Midnight agreed. It was simple, but effective at times. If I just saw the footage, I would have pegged her as a second-year student. She has the basics down, but not much else. I spoke with her before, and she mentioned that she couldn't go to a traditional hero school. Midoriya nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboards as he dropped the screens to a combined workspace and brought up MT Lady's file from the hero database. She got her license from Hyogo Kenritsu Technical College, a college better known for their agricultural courses rather than heroics. In fact, she's the first hero to get a hero license from that school in the last 12 years. And you think this merits further investigation? Midnight suggested. Yes, she's one of the only pro heroes out there that can consistently handle large-scale villains, and if she wasn't properly trained, then yes. Midoriya nodded. Further investigation. Further investigation. Shota thirded, already pulling out his buzzing phone to find Nizu's message on it. Rat God. Further investigation. 3C. Midoriya visibly paled. That would make it 2 places of education that Midoriya lit a fire under. Shota smirked, hiding it behind his scarf. I should start keeping count. I wonder how many we'll have by the time he graduates UA. So, in the meantime, what do you think we can do for MT Lady? Midnight leaned forward, her interest piqued. Picking up the slack will be a first step, the scruffy underground hero murmured. I'll ask if she's interested in joining a hero-exclusive dojo I know about. Gunhead has one going nearby, right? Izuka's eyes pinned him in place as the boy's head snapped around. Shota looked back, feeling unnerved. What? Hero-exclusive martial arts dojo? The hero fanboy asked. They actually exist? Like any person who has just realized that the sign they passed by had said, minefield, the Erasure hero started to feel out his options as he tentatively answered. Yes? Was this terror he was feeling? Eraserhead actually backed up a little as Izuku whipped out his notebook, focusing intensely on the man's eyes. Tell me more. Midnighty, alright folks, thanks to Eraserhead mentioning hero dojos, Green Bean's going to be asleep for 10 minutes or so. Midnighty, and so is Eraserhead actually? Rat God, there's nothing else on their schedules for today. Rat God, so I'm just going to mention that there's a marker in the drawer 2 desks to your right. Rat God, take photos. 3C. Yeah. Boss, you know I love working for you. Yeah, but boy do I regret teaching you emoticons now. Rat God, 3C. Rat God, 3C. Rat God, 3C. Went to Far West. Degree. R. Rat God. Degree for all degree. Fear. Bloody hell, fear. Diggy hole. I'll be in my bunker. Rat God, 7355608. Diggy hole. Damn it. Swearjarbot has deducted 1 yen from Diggy hole's next paycheck. Reason, swearing. Diggy hole. You know, I honestly thought I uninstalled that bot months ago. Izuka found it odd that somnambulist always made him thirsty after he had been put to sleep by the R-18 heroine's lavender-scented purple gas. That being said, he kind of deserved that for grilling Eraserhead so intensely. He finished draining the bottle of water and slid it into the recycling bin, looking thoughtfully at the other victim of Midnight's gas and subsequent prank. After his somnambulist-induced nap, Izuku had spent a solid 5 minutes apologizing, and then another 5 sharing a mirror and a packet of makeup remover wipes with Eraserhead, the 2 of them making sure that they got all of Midnight's doodles off their faces. The time left him idle, and the idleness left him time to think. Eraserhead-sensei, he began, wondering how to word things. Would you hate me if I accepted a strength quirk and invalidated all that hand-to-hand training? Actually, All Might's still a close combat hero. Would my training be invalidated at all? You okay, Midoriya? Izuku blushed. He'd been spacing out again, hadn't he? The words just wouldn't come. Izuku bounced the bottle of green tea in his hand and let out a sigh. Hypothetically, Sensei, if someone offered you a different quirk, or a quirk at all, would you take it? No, he couldn't ask that question. Not unless he wanted to get investigated for being a potential all-for-one recruit, anyway. Sir Night-Eye had said that this was a path that was carefully watched. Izuku dropped his head into his hands and let out a long breath. You all right, Midoriya? Why, since I just keep thinking about quirks. Don't make Midnight gas us again, Midoriya. And no, it's not that kind of thing again. Closing his eyes, the Greenit shook his head. I don't have a quirk, and I'll be up against people with them. Watching this fight. There's not much my quirk can do about Rokuno's quirk, Midoriya, Eraserhead admitted, referring to the 2A student with a rhino mutation quirk. I'd be in exactly the same situation as you, and I still have to do my work as a hero. The dour underground hero scraped the side of his nose, removing the pink marker there, and tossed the tissue away. While no pro hero worth their salt is a one-trick pony, everyone has their limitations: physical, quirk, mental, emotional. A physical enhancer type hero is at a disadvantage against a villain with a quirk that can attack at range, and heroes with sensory type quirks are effectively quirkless, he continued, staring off into the middle distance. My point is, Midoriya, that nobody's able to simply power through every obstacle they face. You know that in a chase you have to have more tricks than run faster. Right. So, train harder and train smarter, learn new skills, pick up new equipment, Aizawa listed off, and at the end of the day, as long as you've done everything you could, well, nobody could ask you to do more. Izuku nodded, thoughts roiling around inside of him. Lady. Hey, a kid. Just got back to the agency and I wanted to say, thanks again for inviting me over to UA. My manager is over the moon with the media package you sent me. He actually smiled. Lady, I'm looking forward to seeing the full analysis from you once you're done going over the footage. Lady. Also, don't tell anyone, but I really appreciated that pep talk afterwards. Lady. Ciao. Izuku sat at his desk, typing away on his laptop. Through his door, he could hear the barely contained chaos of his mom working with her friends, doing something in VR. Maybe he'd open the stream once he was done with this report. Rolling back the recording again, he dropped a marker on the timeline, then slowly played back the brawl between Haru and Lady, smiling as a thought occurred to him. If it weren't for the buildings for scale, it looked a lot like a normal-sized woman trying to swat a fly. A fly that occasionally shot you with a taser. But there was some deliberation in her actions, herding Haru towards gaps in buildings and away from open spaces. Izuku felt a sense of second-hand pride for MT Lady as he noted this, both to make sure Haru-senpai knew to watch out for this tactic, and heaping what praise he could on MT Lady for using that capture technique. Improving both as heroes, one piece of advice at a time. His eye flicked towards his phone as he spotted a notification from the Birdwatchers, a poster who regularly posted photos of Hawks as he left or returned to his agency. Picking up his phone, he began to type. Pro Hero Hawks. UA Analyst Green. Hey, Hawks, are you busy right now? Pro Hero Hawks. Not at all, kid, just got back to the agency. How's the hero of the hour? UA Analyst Green. I already told you I didn't do much. The pro heroes did all the work, especially All Might. Pro Hero Hawks. Humility is one thing, kid, but putting yourself down is very. Pro Hero Hawks. I mean, I don't like people who like to brag either. Pro Hero Hawks. But come on, you did some serious hero work there. Pro Hero Hawks. Getting a bunch of pro heroes to work together on the fly, without being a hero team in the first place, is no joke, even with the pun intended. Pro Hero Hawks. So anyway, what did you want to talk to me about, Izuku? UA Analyst Green. Do you think I'd be a better hero if I had a quirk? UA Analyst Green. I'm sorry. That was really sudden. UA Analyst Green. It's just that, at some points in that fight, I felt so useless. UA Analyst Green. Like I could have done more if it had been a quirked person was there instead of me. Pro Hero Hawks. Kid, I feel that way too sometimes. Pro Hero Hawks. Every hero, heck, every person, will feel that way. Pro Hero Hawks. At some point, everyone's going to have a moment where they wish they had a different quirk. Pro Hero Hawks, or a better one, or whatever. Pro Hero Hawks. But I don't have a laser vision quirk to snipe the hostage taker. I don't have a fire quirk that can help with the hypothermia. Pro Hero Hawks. So I gotta focus on what I do have and work with that. Pro Hero Hawks. Yeah, I have a stupidly versatile quirk, but that doesn't mean I can do everything. Pro Hero Hawks. Can I walk through a firestorm? Nope. Pro Hero Hawks. And sometimes that's exactly the easiest way to save a civilian. Pro Hero Hawks. But I can't, so I have to figure out some other way to save them. Pro Hero Hawks. Which is something you are annoyingly good at, let me remind you. Pro Hero Hawks. What matters is that you do the most with what you can do. Pro Hero Hawks. And work out ways to cover for what you can't do. Pro Hero Hawks. Learn new skills, improve on the ones you have, bring support gear, form a hero team. Pro Hero Hawks. If you can fly, then you can obviously do more compared to a hero that can't. Pro Hero Hawks. But that doesn't mean that you aren't allowed to bring a jetpack or something. Pro Hero Hawks. By the way, can power loaders suit you up with a jetpack when you intern with me? Pro Hero Hawks. Green, you didn't ghost me again, did you? UA Analyst Green. No, I'm still here. UA Analyst Green. I just really needed to hear that, I think. UA Analyst Green. Thank you, Talks. Pro Hero Hawks. Izuku hid in the late Saturday afternoon light, sticking to the half-shadows as he picked his way up to the rooftop, leaping the chain-link fence over the top and then hopping down, bouncing lightly on his heels as he checked that the roof was clear. His mom was still working, would be until late, so he decided to do his thinking away from the noise and the laughter. Staring pensively into the distance, he sat on a bench that had been bolted onto the top of the roof and closed his eyes, cutting away from the breezy afternoon as it gave way to a cool evening. Izuku pondered the decision that he had to make, and did so until it was still dark and his phone buzzed as his mother calling him downstairs to have dinner. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and Toshinori was sharing a pot of tea at the cafe on the Might Tower observation deck with Tsukachi when his phone rang. Hello, this is Yagi speaking, he began. All Might. I hope you aren't busy. No, not at all, young Midoriya. He brightened, pressing the phone closer to his ear. I hope you're well, and I'm guessing that you have an answer for me? Yes, All Might. Toshinori chuckled warmly. He steeled himself for the worst, but at the same time, a small part of his heart hoped for the best. Well, let's hear it. Yes, All Might, Izuku stammered out. I accept your offer. Please, allow me to become your successor. Magnificent. There was a yelp from Naomasa. Yes, and please, the tea. But, All Might? There's one more thing. Yes. All Might. I have to tell my mother about this. There's going to be too many changes if I accept your offer, and she's either going to figure it out or I'm going to tell her, and I'd rather do the latter because that way I don't get grounded until I'm 40. The blonde managed to keep his laughter down and took a moment to consider before nodding. Yes, young Midoriya, you're right. I only ask that you impress upon her just how important this secret is. It's going to be yours in the future, not mine, so you have the right to divulge its secrets to who you think is trustworthy, but please, be careful with whoever else you trust with this secret, my boy. Of course, yes I will be. Thank you, All Might, I'll go talk to her now. Izuku let out a breath, before jumping onto his bed and screaming into the pillow. He finally calmed down, and sat back up, hands trembling as he checked the time. Just one more thing to do then. Walking from his room, he made his way down the hallway to his parents' room. He knocked on the door once, twice, then heard his mother's voice calling him to come in. Twisting the doorknob, he pushed it open and peeked inside. Hey Mom? I spoke with All Might earlier this week and... Toshinori's voice was barely containing his excitement as the phone line connected. Mirai? Hey Mirai. Young Midoriya just called and he said yes. He accepted. Congratulations Yagi-sen, I'm glad. Mirai huffed out a brief laugh before pressing the phone closer to his lips. Dibs not telling Gran Torino, though. The phone line cut. Toshinori looked at his phone, a sour pout forming on his lips. Sheet.